So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Marvel? So let's start the series. The Tear in the Sky. Konohagakure, Hokage's office, 4:37 p.m. The air in Naruto Uzumaki's office was a layered tapestry of familiar smells that did nothing to calm the restless energy thrumming beneath his skin. Old scrolls, ink, parchment, and the faint, sweet decay of pressed flowers used in archival seals, formed the base note. Overlaying that was the sharp, clean scent of polished wood from his massive desk, and the ever-present, comforting aroma of miso ramen broth that seemed to have seeped into his very pores over the decades. A half-empty bowl sat cooling next to a teetering stack of trade agreements with the land of rivers. Naruto leaned back in his chair, a finely crafted piece of furniture that still felt alien to him. The seventh Hokage's robe, heavy with embroidered flame patterns, hung from his shoulders like a mantle of expectation. He stretched, and the vertebrae in his neck popped in a rapid-fire series of clicks that echoed too loud in the quiet room. A dull ache had taken up residence at the base of his skull, a physical manifestation of the bureaucratic siege he was under. Click. 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 He tapped the fountain pen, a gift from the daimyo, absurdly ornate, against the desk surface. The sound was precise, mocking. It was the sound of order, of procedure. The exact opposite of the chaotic, beautiful noise of the village outside his window. And there was the sound. The true symphony of Konoha. Distant, rhythmic thwacks from the training grounds where new genin learned to throw their first kunai. The whisper rustle of thousands of leaves in the great trees that cradled the village, a sound like a gentle, endless tide. The hum of life, vendors calling the day's final specials, children's laughter chasing the twilight, the low murmur of 100 conversations in the streets below. It was peace. It was the dream he'd bled for, the future he'd carved out with his own hands. So why did it feel like a cage made of silk? A familiar, long-suffering sigh preceded the man himself. Shikamaru Nara stood in the doorway, backlit by the honey-gold light of the setting sun. His shadow, stretched and thin, pointed directly at Naruto like an accusation. Troublesome, Shikamaru mumbled, the word as much a part of his greeting as a nod. But his eyes, dark and perpetually bagged, held none of their usual languidness. They were sharp, focused, the eyes of the Hokage's brilliant, reluctant strategist. Sensory division. Northeast quadrant. Near the old Nakano River ruins. Naruto stopped clicking the pen. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, absorbing the casual dread in his friend's tone. What about it? Chakra readings. Shikamaru stepped inside, closing the door with a soft click that felt final. They're wrong. Not just unusual. Wrong. Define wrong. It's not a signature. It's an absence. A null point. Like a hole in the world. It's not emitting chakra, it's consuming it. Pulling in ambient energy from the air, the earth, the water. And it's growing. Slowly, but definitely. Shikamaru's voice was a dry, analytical monotone, but Naruto saw the subtle tension in his jaw, the almost imperceptible tightening of the skin around his eyes. Shikamaru was afraid. Not panicked, but professionally, coldly afraid. That was more terrifying than any shouted warning. A cold knot, separate from the dull paperwork ache, coiled in Naruto's gut. It was an old friend, this feeling. The prickle on the back of his neck seconds before a trap sprung in the forest of death. The ice in his veins the moment pain's almighty push had begun. The primal, animal awareness that had kept him alive through 2 great wars. Danger. Not from a person, but from a place. He was on his feet before he'd consciously decided to move, the Hokage robe swirling around him. Let's go see this hole. The Nakano River ruins, 5:15 p.m. The journey was a blur of green and shadow. They moved as shinobi, silent and swift through the canopy, the setting sun dappling the forest floor in shifting patterns of light and dark. The closer they got, the more the familiar symphony of the forest faded. Bird calls ceased. Insect chirps died out. An unnatural silence descended, thick and oppressive. Then the smell hit. It wasn't the rich, damp scent of soil and decaying leaves, nor the crisp aroma of pine. This was chemical, alien. Ozone, sharp, metallic, and dry, the smell of the air after a devastating lightning strike, but amplified, purified. Underlying it was something worse, a cold, antiseptic sterility, like the inside of a forgotten laboratory or the void between stars. It was a smell that carried no life, only absence. It dried out Naruto's sinuses and made the hair on his forearm stand erect. Sasuke Uchiha was already there when they landed at the clearing's edge. He stood like a statue carved from night, his black cloak unstirred by the faint, unnatural breeze that seemed to be pulling toward the center of the glade. He didn't turn as they approached, his gaze fixed ahead. You feel it, Sasuke stated. It wasn't a question. Yeah, Naruto breathed out, the word a cloud in the suddenly chill air. I feel it. The tear was not what he'd expected. It wasn't a jagged rip in the fabric of the world. It was a vertical disturbance, a shimmering pane of warped reality about 10 feet tall and half as wide. It hung in the air like a corrupted mirror, its surface a liquid swirl of impossible colors, violet so deep it hurt to look at, a sickly, phosphorescent green, veins of bruised yellow. The colors moved like oil on water, languid and hypnotic. A low, subaudible hum vibrated up from the ground through the soles of their feet, settling unpleasantly in their molars. The vegetation around it told the true story. In a perfect circle of about 20 feet, the grass was not just dead. It was desiccated, leached of all color and vitality, reduced to a uniform, brittle gray ash that crunched underfoot. Even the soil looked pale and drained. Yeah, Naruto repeated, his voice barely a whisper against the oppressive hum. That's not good. Shikamaru was already in motion, his hands weaving through a series of hand signs with fluid precision. Shadow Possession Jutsu. His shadow, amplified by his chakra, stretched from his feet, a pool of darkness that slithered across the gray earth toward the shimmering edge of the anomaly. The moment the shadow tendril made contact, it didn't just stop. It recoiled, snapping back to Shikamaru as if burned. He hissed, a sharp intake of breath, and shook his hand, fingers curling in pain. It rejects chakra-based techniques. Violently. It's not just inert, it's actively hostile to our energy. Sasuke's left eye shifted, the tomo of his Sharingan spinning and melting into the concentric circles of the Rinnegan. The divine eye glowed with a faint, ominous light. It's a bridge, he said, his voice flat, devoid of inflection. Or a wound. The dimensional fabric here is frayed. It leads, elsewhere. He paused, the Rinnegan analyzing data invisible to the others. The flow is primarily one way. Into here. But there is a feedback loop. A tiny one. Elsewhere where? Naruto asked, his gaze locked on the swirling colors. Before Sasuke could answer, the tear pulsed. The hum spiked into a physical force, a screech of distorted reality that felt like icicles being driven into their ear canals. Naruto clapped his hands over his ears, his teeth gritted. The light from the tear flared, bleaching the color from the world for a single, blinding second. And from its chaotic center, a figure was violently ejected. It was a tangle of limbs and garish color, spinning uncontrollably through the air with a yelp that was swallowed by the screech. It crashed through the rotten remains of an old cedar log 20 yards away, the impact sending a shower of splintered wood and damp mulch into the air. Naruto was moving before the debris settled, his body overriding his shock. Hey! Are you Al? The man in the freshly made crater groaned, a sound of genuine, bone-deep pain and confusion. He pushed himself up on shaking arms, mulch and dead leaves sticking to a suit that was like nothing Naruto had ever seen. Skin-tight, covering him from head to toe in a pattern of red and blue. A spider emblem, bold and black, was splayed across his chest and back. His head was encased in a mask, white with large, expressive black lenses for eyes. He looked lean, built for speed, and utterly, completely lost. Right? Naruto finished, skidding to a halt at the crater's edge. The Spider-Man, for that was what he looked like, some bizarre, human-sized insect, looked up. His head swiveled, taking in Naruto, his Hokage robes, his whiskered face, then Shikamaru and the imposing figure of Sasuke. The mask's lenses widened comically. Whoa. Okay. Not queens. Definitely not queens. His voice was muffled by the mask, but the queen's accent was unmistakable, layered with a high-pitched, panicked energy. Did a wizard do this? It's always a wizard. Or a dude with a cube. Or a green rock. Please, he pleaded, holding up a gloved hand, please tell me this isn't a green rock situation. He tried to stand, got one foot under him, and wobbled violently, gripping the side of his head with a grimace. The ground is spinning. And buzzing. Why is everything buzzing? My teeth are humming. Who are you? Sasuke demanded. He hadn't moved from his position, but his hand now rested lightly on the hilt of the Kusanagi blade. His Rinnegan was still active, dissecting the newcomer's strange, non-chakra energy signature. I'm, friendly neighborhood, he trailed off, the practiced line dying in his throat as his senses fully processed the scene, the ancient trees, the shinobi garb, the palpable, dangerous energy radiating from the three men, the eerie, swirling wound in reality behind them. You know what, let's start over. I'm Peter. Peter Parker. I was, stopping a bank robbery. Standard Tuesday. There was this glowy thing in the vault door. Like, it had eaten through the metal. I webbed it up to contain it, poked it to see if I could. I dunno, unpoke it. Then whoosh. Spinning lights, feeling like my atoms were being used as a cocktail shaker, then crash. Here. He finally found his footing, his movements subtly shifting from disoriented to a predator's fluid grace. So. The million-dollar question. Where is here, exactly? And why do you have a leaf on your headbands? Is that, like, a theme? Are you Arbor Day enthusiasts? Militant gardeners? Naruto blinked. The guy talked like a scroll unraveling downhill. But there was an undercurrent of genuine intelligence beneath the panic, and no malice. Just a deep, profound bewilderment. And pain. He was subtly favoring his left side, his breathing a bit too shallow. You're hurt, Naruto said, his tone shifting from wary to concerned. Bruised rib. Or 12. Bank robbers with fancy tech hit hard when you're mid-dimensional hop, apparently. Peter's spider sense, a constant, gentle buzz at the back of his skull since he'd tumbled out of the tier, suddenly screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a full-body convulsion of premonition. Every nerve ending fired at once. He flinched so hard he nearly lost his footing again. Down, he yelled, not a request but a raw, instinctual command. He didn't think. He didn't plan. His body moved on its own terrifyingly efficient programming. He lunged, not at Naruto, but past him. A twin THWIP sounded from his wrists, and two thick ropes of white, fibrous material shot out, not at an enemy, but at a heavy, dead branch directly above Shikamaru's head that had been jarred loose by the tier's pulse. The webs pinned the branch securely to the trunk with a solid thud. At the exact same moment, three figures detached themselves from the surrounding shadows. They were not human. Their skin was the color and texture of weathered granite, cracked and fissured. They had no eyes, only smooth, shallow sockets. Their mouths were lipless, horizontal gashes that didn't move when they spoke. They moved with a jerky, insectal speed that was deeply wrong, their limbs bending at slightly incorrect angles. They smelled of dry dust, ancient tombs, and that same, chilling sterile cold that emanated from the tear. Outsiders, one hissed, its voice the sound of rocks grinding together deep underground. The convergence must be cleansed. The foreign energies must be scoured. Sasuke was a blur of motion. The Kusanagi sang from its sheath, a flash of silver in the dim light. It passed through the first creature's neck. There was no spray of blood, no gristle. The head toppled, and the body crumbled inward, collapsing into a pile of gray ash and gravel. Naruto's hands were already a golden blur. A Rasengan formed in his palm, the azure sphere of compressed chakra materializing with a sound like 1,000 furious hornets. He drove it into the chest of the second creature. It didn't scream, it vibrated apart, its form unraveling into motes of dust that were sucked towards the tear before dissipating. The third creature was faster, smarter. It ignored the fighters, darting past them with a skittering gait, its crystalline claws aimed, not at a person, but at the unstable, still pulsing tear itself. Or at Peter, who stood closest to it. Peter's body was already in motion, reacting to the spider sense's precise directional warning. He dropped into a low crouch, the creature's claws whistling through the air where his head had been. He planted a palm flat on the ashen ground, used it as a pivot, and swung both legs up in a powerful, scissoring kick that connected with the creature's midsection. It staggered. Before it could recover, he fired two webs from his wrists, not to bind, but to yank. The lines attached to two trees on either side. He pulled, and the creature was snapped off its feet, suspended for a moment in the air. Peter launched himself upward, driving his knee into its stony back with a sickening crack. It shattered on impact, exploding into harmless powder that rained down around him. For a second, there was silence, broken only by the reduced, gurgling hum of the tear and Peter's own slightly ragged breathing. He stood amidst the settling dust, looking at his clenched fists, then at the piles of debris that had been his opponents. Okay, he said to himself, his voice a shaky exhale. So. Monster things. From the glowy hole. New baseline established. Got it. He turned slowly to face Naruto, his lenses somehow managing to convey a profound, soul-deep bewilderment. Seriously, though. Where? Am I? Naruto met Sasuke's gaze. The Uchiha gave a barely perceptible nod. The creature was not of this world. The stranger, while bizarre, had acted in defense. Shikamaru was already on the perimeter, his shadow weaving a complex, multi-layered containment seal in the earth around the clearing, his face a mask of intense concentration. The tear pulsed again, weaker now, but still present. A problem. A massive, unknown problem. And this, Peter, was the key. Naruto turned back to the red and blue enigma. He let the Hokage mantle fall away, just for a moment, and offered the grin that had disarmed demons and gods alike, a little goofy, utterly genuine, and fiercely bright. You're in the land of fire, he said, stepping forward and offering a calloused hand. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, the 7th Hokage. That's Shikamaru, my strategist, and Sasuke, our resident eyes in the back of his head. He jerked a thumb at the swirling tear. And that's our new, mutually unwanted backyard decoration. Welcome to Konoha. We've got, his grin turned wry, a lot to talk about. Peter stared at the offered hand, then at the man's open face. The spider sense had quieted from a scream to a persistent, low-grade buzz of wrongness about this entire place. But the man's energy, it wasn't hostile. It was warm. Like a sunbeam. Cautiously, he reached out and took the hand. The grip was firm, solid, reassuring. Peter Parker. Spider-Man. And yeah, he said, the bravado leaking out of him to be replaced by a bone-tired honesty. Talking sounds good. Also, maybe a place to sit down. And some aspirin. A whole bottle. As they turned to leave the cursed clearing, Peter cast one last look over his shoulder at the tear. It shimmered, a malignant jewel in the dying light. It was a one-way ticket to somewhere that wasn't home, and it was still open. The adventure, terrifying, absurd, and utterly, wildly unexpected, had begun. Chapter 2, The Web of Secrets. Konoha Intelligence and Analysis Division, Sublevel 2, 9:02 p.m. The air in the underground medical analysis chamber was a sterile cocktail that fought a losing battle against the lingering sense of its occupant. Antiseptic, sharp and lemony, clashed with the ancient dust smell of archived scrolls stacked on nearby shelves. Overpowering both was the new, alien signature, the scent of Peter Parker's suit. It was a complex bouquet, high-tech polymers with a faint, clean ozone note, the underlying sweetness of his web fluid formula, like candied almonds and volatile chemicals, and the stubborn, grounding aroma of New York City that clung to him, a ghost of subway grime, pizza grease, and diesel exhaust. Peter sat perched on the edge of a reinforced mezzanine cot, feeling the cold steel frame through his suit. His mask was rolled up to just below his nose, revealing a mouth set in a grimace. Sakura Haruno, the famed kunoichi and head of Konoha's medical division, stood before him. Her hair was a vibrant pink in the stark overhead light, but her eyes were the color of a winter lake, calm, deep, and intensely focused. Glowing green chakra sheathed her hands as she moved them over his torso, not touching, but hovering an inch from the fabric. Fascinating, she murmured, more to herself than to him. Her voice was low, clinical. The dermal layer exhibits enhanced tensile strength approximating a lightweight flak jacket. The cellular regeneration rate in the subcutaneous tissue it's off our comparative scales. It's not healing like a wound, it's rewriting itself in real time. She pressed two chakra-imbued fingers gently against a specific point on his lower left ribcage. A bolt of white-hot, precise agony lanced through Peter. He jerked back with a bitten-off yelp. Youch. Okay, doc, easy on the goods. The super healing is nice and all, but the nerves are still hooked up and reporting for duty. Sakura didn't flinch. Her gaze flicked up to his face, analyzing his pain response. You have 3 microfractured ribs, severe intercostal bruising, minor ligament tearing, and a diffuse, low-level energy contamination in your bloodstream that doesn't match any chakra profile we have. She let the green glow fade from her hands, crossing her arms. Based on the trauma described and the foreign energy signature, you should be in systemic shock. Or dead. Peter managed a shaky, lopsided smile. It felt brittle on his face. Yeah, that's the Parker luck in a nutshell. All the power, none of the useful painkillers. He rolled his shoulders, trying to dissipate the ache. The bite that did this, it came with a metabolic overhaul. Fast healing, enhanced senses, the whole shebang. Side effects include chronic anxiety and a desperate need for a cheeseburger. Across the room, under the cool blue light of a chakra-reactive map, the other half of the conversation was happening in hushed, tense tones. Naruto leaned against a wall, arms crossed, watching Peter. Sasuke stood like a obsidian pillar near the door, his Sharingan deactivated but his gaze missing nothing. Shikamaru was the center of activity, his fingers steepled as he studied a large scroll unfurled on a central table. On it was not a map of lands, but of energy flows, a complex diagram of the tear, with swirling, anxious lines depicting its chakra-draining effect. The anomaly is stable for now, Shikamaru said, his voice a dry rasp in the quiet room. But it's a parasitic stable. It's leaching minute but constant amounts of chakra from the surrounding environment, soil, water, air, to sustain its own structure. It's acting like a root system. He tapped a specific intersection of lines. And it's bidirectional. The flow is 99% into our world, but there's a 1% feedback pulse. Something is acknowledging the connection. Sasuke's voice cut through the analysis, flat and definitive. The creatures were not native. Not to his world, not to ours. They were from the interstitial space. The between. They are scavengers. Or cleaners. They were drawn to the foreign energy signature, he nodded toward Peter, and they were attempting to sever the connection by eliminating the source or collapsing the bridge. So we've got an interdimensional puncture wound, Naruto summarized, pushing off the wall. He ran a hand through his spiky blonde hair, a gesture of familiar frustration. It's spewing out, what? Reality janitors? And friendly neighborhood spider people. He turned his full attention to Peter. You said a glowy thing. In a bank vault. What was it? All eyes in the room settled on him. The weight of their gazes was physical. These were people who moved mountains, who fought gods. Their curiosity was a focused, dangerous thing. Peter took a deep breath, ignoring the twinge in his side. He started with New York. Not the postcard version, but the lived-in one. He described the symphony of chaos that was his life, swinging between skyscrapers that smelled of hot asphalt and pigeon droppings, the acrid tang of Doc Ock's welding, the synthetic cherry blossom scent of Mysterio's hallucinogens. He talked about the Avengers, the thunderous crackle of Thor's lightning, the repulsor whine of Iron Man's suit, the weird, ozone-and-old-book smell of Doctor Strange's portals. He spoke of the big stuff, the Chitauri invasion, the sky tearing open over Manhattan, the silent, dread-filled vacuum of space before the snap. He talked about the smaller, personal wars, the Green Goblin's maniacal laughter cutting through the rumble of the Roosevelt Island tram, the cold, calculating eyes of Wilson Fisk. This guy, Mysterio, Beck, he was an illusionist. Tech and holograms. Made you see monsters, made the world bend. But this in the vault, Peter's hands moved vaguely, sketching shapes in the air. It wasn't an image. It was a lack. A hole in the bank's door, edges melting like wax under a heatless flame. Inside was just, swirling dark. And cold. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill your skin, it whispers to your bones that heat is a temporary, foolish idea. I webbed over it, a containment protocol. I touched the edge, thinking maybe I could feel its frequency, disrupt it. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Genius move, Parker. Then bam. Spaghettification sensation. Colors that don't have names. Here. He finished, the ghost of a smile touching his lips as he thought of home. My Aunt May makes this wheat cakes with walnut cream sauce. The kitchen smells like butter and maple syrup for hours. My friend, MJ. She always smells like coffee and the charcoal from her art pencils. And Queens, it smells like exhaust and hope. Mostly exhaust. The room was silent for a long moment. Naruto's expression had softened. He saw it now, clear as day. Not a threat. A kid, powerful and kind, tossed into a cosmic washing machine. A reflection, distorted but recognizable, of his own younger self. Your world sounds really loud, Naruto said finally, the understatement profound. Yours is really, really quiet, Peter replied. And leafy. Then his spider sense, which had been a constant, low-grade hum of otherness since he arrived, tingled with a specific, directional focus. It wasn't danger. It was power. He looked directly at Sasuke. And you. Your eye. Before, during the fight, it changed. The pattern shifted. It's not just for show, is it? It sees things. Things that aren't there. Or things that are there, but most people can't see. Sasuke's expression didn't change, but a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of surprise crossed his features. It sees truth, he stated. And lies. And the flows of energy that compose all things. Cool. No pressure, Peter mumbled, pulling his mask the rest of the way off. The cool air of the room felt good on his sweat-damp face. So, plan? I'm assuming find a way to zap me back to Queens is item A on the agenda, preferably before weird gravel monsters eat your forest. The phenomena are intrinsically linked, Shikamaru said, leaning over his scroll. Your arrival was the catalyst that widened the tear. Or the tear formed to facilitate your arrival. The causality is muddied. Solving one problem will likely illuminate the other. But we need more data. We need to understand the nature of the artifact you encountered. Its origin, its purpose. Before Peter could ask how they planned to do that from another dimension, the heavy door to the chamber slid open with a hiss. A young Chunin, her face pale under her headband, stood at attention, breathing slightly too fast. Hokage-sama. Urgent report from perimeter Gamma. The anomaly, it just emitted a massive energy pulse. Chakra drain reading spiked 300% for 5 seconds. And sensory teams detect multiple inbound signatures from the northeastern forest approach vector. Fast. At least 2 dozen. Their energy profiles match the hostile entities encountered earlier. The sterile calm of the room shattered. The air became charged, thick with the scent of impending violence. Sakura's medical composure vanished, replaced by the readiness of a veteran warrior. Naruto's easy posture solidified into the coiled tension of a frontline commander. Sasuke's Sharingan activated with a faint, red glow. "They are not scouts," he said, his voice colder than the void Peter had described. "It is an incursion force." Naruto slammed a fist into his open palm. The sound was a sharp crack in the tense air, and a flickering aura of orange chakra shimmered around him for a heartbeat. "Then we stop it. Shikamaru, mobilize Jonin squads 3, 5, and 7. Full combat protocols. Seal the area. Evacuate the nearest civilian outpost. Sasuke, you're with me. We'll hold the line at the tear itself." He turned to Peter. The Hokage's gaze was firm, but not unkind. "You should stay here. You're injured. This isn't your world, and this isn't your fight. Sakura can continue her analysis. We'll handle it." Peter stared at him. The words were logical, protective. They were the words someone said to a civilian. He hadn't been a civilian since he was 15. He slowly stood up from the cot, ignoring the protest from his ribs. He tested his weight, rolling his neck. The pain was a sharp, grounding reality. The adrenaline beginning to seep into his veins was better than any drug. He reached down and picked up his mask. The material felt familiar, reassuring. He looked at Naruto, and his lenses, though opaque, somehow conveyed a fierce, unwavering resolve. "A wise man I know, the wisest man I've ever known, once told me something," Peter said, his voice quiet but clear in the hushed room. "With great power, there must also come great responsibility. That tear is here because of me. Those things are coming because of that tear. People could get hurt. Your people." He pulled the mask over his head. It sealed with a soft, definitive hiss. "This is exactly my fight." He took a step forward, his movements regaining that fluid, arachnid grace. "Besides," he added, the familiar, nervous bravado seeping back into his tone as he aimed a web at the ceiling structural beam, "from what I saw back there, you guys could use a little web slinging. Variety's the spice of life, right?" He pulled, launching himself up to crouch upside down in the corner where wall met ceiling, a splash of red and blue against the drab stone. He looked down at them, a strange, alien silhouette. Naruto stared up at him. He saw the defiance, the responsibility, the echo of his own Nindo. A wide, fierce, fox-like grin spread across his face. It was a grin that had disarmed gods and rallied armies. "All right then, Spider-Man," Naruto said, his voice booming with sudden, bright conviction. "Let's go save the world. Again." The race was on. The horror was approaching through the dark trees. And high in the corner, a hero from another world prepared to fight for a home that wasn't his, because it was the only thing he knew how to do. The Nakano River perimeter, 11:48 p.m. The forest no longer slept. It wept. The hum of the tear had mutated into a physical distortion, a discordant choir of whines, shudders, and deep, subsonic groans that vibrated the marrow in their bones. The air, thick with ozone and sterile cold, now carried the loamy stench of violently upturned earth and the sour sap smell of shattered pine. Moonlight, filtered and fractured by the tear's swirling aurora, drenched the clearing in pulses of sick violet and corpse green, making the world seem like a negative of itself. Naruto stood at the forward edge of the defensive line, a solid wall of Konoha's best flanking him. To his right, Sasuke was a statue of shadow. To his left, perched on a gnarled branch that seemed to recoil from his touch, Spider-Man waited, a solitary note of primary color in the monochrome nightmare. Peter's spider sense was no longer a tingling background hum. It was a percussive drumroll of dread hammering against the inside of his skull, each beat synchronized with the tear's sickly pulse. He didn't need to see them to know. "They're here," he whispered, the words swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. The forest edge didn't give birth to them. It unfolded. The stone-skinned entities melted from the spaces between tree trunks, from the deep shadows under roots, from the very bark itself, as if the world were rejecting them, pushing them out. 24. 3. Their eyeless faces were uniformly turned toward the pulsating tear, their lipless mouths moving in a silent, chanting syncopation. One detached from the gloom. It was larger, its form shifting and unstable, with 4 arms ending in jagged, glass-like claws that refracted the tear's awful light. Its voice, when it spoke, was the sound of continents grinding against each other deep in the earth. The convergence must be purified. The foreign energies are a contagion. Begin the harvest. The horde surged forward in a wave of jerking, unnatural motion. The final battle for the Nakano River had begun. The Weeping Forest. Nakano River perimeter, 11:48 p.m. The forest no longer slept. It wept. The hum of the tear had mutated into a physical distortion, a discordant choir of whines, shudders, and deep, subsonic groans that vibrated the marrow in their bones. The air, thick with the ozone-sterile stench, now carried the loamy, wet dog smell of violently upturned earth and the sour, sappy reek of shattered pine. Moonlight, filtered and fractured by the tear's swirling aurora, drenched the clearing in pulses of sick violet and corpse green, making the world seem like a photographic negative of itself. Shadows didn't fall, they leaked from objects, pooling in directions that defied the moon's position. Naruto Uzumaki stood at the forward edge of the defensive line, a solid wall of Konoha's finest flanking him. He could feel their controlled breaths, the subtle shifts in their stances, the faint scent of nervous sweat cut through with steel resolve. To his right, Sasuke Uchiha was a statue carved from night, his presence a silent promise of violence. To his left, perched on a gnarled branch that seemed to recoil from his touch, Spider-Man waited, a solitary, vivid splash of red and blue in the monochrome nightmare. Peter's spider sense was no longer a tingling background hum. It was a percussive drumroll of dread hammering against the inside of his skull, each beat synchronized with the tear's sickly pulse. It wasn't just warning him of danger, it was mapping it. He felt the approaching entities as points of icy pressure in the dark, moving with that jarring, wrong rhythm. He didn't need to see them. "They're here," he whispered, the words a ghost against the oppressive atmospheric thrum. The forest edge didn't give birth to them. It unfolded. The stone-skinned entities manifested not from hiding places, but from the spaces between tree trunks, from the deep velvet shadows under roots, from the very bark itself, as if the world were rejecting them, pushing them out into the open. 24. 3. More shimmering into existence like mirages solidifying. Their eyeless faces were uniformly turned toward the pulsating tear, their lipless mouths moving in a silent, chanting syncopation that made Peter's teeth ache. One detached from the gloom. It was a head taller than the others, its form less humanoid, more bestial and unstable. 4 arms, each ending in jagged, translucent claws that refracted the tear's awful light into tiny, painful rainbows. Its voice, when it spoke, was the sound of continents grinding against each other in the deep, hot dark of the earth. The convergence must be purified, it intoned, the words vibrating in their sternums. The foreign energies are a contagion. The anomaly and its vector must be scoured. Begin the harvest. The horde surged forward in a wave of jerking, unnatural motion. They didn't run, they skittered, their movements a blur of grayscale and sharp angles. Fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu. A Jonin from the left flank unleashed a roaring sphere of flame that engulfed the front runners. The heat washed over the defenders, a brief, comforting warmth against the pervasive chill. The creatures within the conflagration crumbled to ash, but others simply scrambled over the smoldering remains, their stone hides blackened but seemingly undeterred. They're highly resistant to elemental ninjutsu. Shikamaru's voice crackled through the small communication seal Naruto's ear. Their cores are vulnerable. Use taijutsu or pinpoint attacks. Chausis erupted with a sound like a rockslide. Kunai and shuriken flew in glittering clouds, most deflecting off stony hides with showers of sparks and a sound like striking flint. A Jonin to Naruto's left, a man with a scar over his eye, was swarmed by 3 creatures. His sword took one's head off, but the other 2 latched onto his limbs. His scream was a short, wet gurgle as they dragged him, thrashing, into the deeper shadows under the trees. The silence that followed was more terrible than the scream. Naruto's blood went hot. A familiar, fiery anger, tempered by years of leadership but never extinguished, ignited in his gut. Shadow Clone Jutsu. The air around him poofed into a thick, blinding cloud of smoke. When it cleared, not dozens, but hundreds of Naruto stood shoulder to shoulder, a golden-haired army each glowing with a faint, determined aura. The sight was staggering, a testament to a bottomless well of power. They didn't yell a battle cry. They simply charged, a tsunami of orange and determination meeting the gray tide. The sound was apocalyptic. A cacophony of shattering stone, explosive poofs of dispelling clones, and the visceral thuds of fist meeting granite. Clones grappled with creatures, sacrificing themselves to expose crystalline chest cores for a comrade's kunai. It was controlled, sacrificial chaos. Sasuke was a phantom of precision. He didn't engage the swarm. He moved through it, his Kusanagi a flicker of silver lightning. Each step, each turn, was an economy of motion ending in a thrust or slice that found a core. A creature would raise a claw, only to find the sword already piercing its chest, leaving it to crumble as Sasuke was already 3 steps away, his Sharingan predicting the chaotic movements of 5 opponents at once. Peter launched himself into the fray. Swing. Release. Kick. He became a red and blue pinball of motion, using the trees as his arena. His webs were useless on the creatures' bodies, they slid off the non-porous stone, but the environment was his weapon. He webbed two creatures together at the ankles, sending them crashing face-first into the ashen earth. He swung a third like a tetherball into a thick oak with a satisfying crunch. He dropped onto the back of a larger beast, trying to web its eye sockets shut. It roared, a sound of grinding boulders, and bucked violently. One of its four arms snapped backwards at an impossible angle, the crystalline claws grazing Peter's left side. It wasn't a deep cut. It barely penetrated the suit's top layer. But the sensation was not of pain. It was of cold. A deep, soul-numbing, absolute cold that lanced through the suit's insulation and his enhanced metabolism like a spear of dry ice. It stole his breath. For a second, his spider sense went silent, overwhelmed by the void-like chill. "Okay, rude," he gasped, flipping away with a stumble he barely corrected, firing a web line to a high branch. He hung there for a second, shivering, his hand pressed to his side. The suit was torn, and beneath it, his skin felt unnaturally numb. He looked down. Naruto was a blazing sun in the chaos, a single Rasengan shredding through three creatures at once. Sasuke was a dark comet leaving trails of disintegrating enemies. These men were forces of nature. But there were too many monsters. And they were slowly, inexorably, pushing toward the tear. The four-armed leader was at the forefront, its claws shattering clones and deflecting concentrated ninjutsu with shields of shimmering, gray energy. The leader slammed its primary claws into the ground. With a sound like tearing canvas, jagged spikes of dark crystal erupted from the earth in a line, impaling two Jonin and a dozen shadow clones who poofed into smoke. It began a deliberate, lumbering advance straight for the tear, its focus absolute, ignoring all other combatants. "We can't let it reach the anomaly." Shikamaru's voice was tight with strain in Naruto's ear. "Its energy signature is spiking in tandem with the tear. It might be trying to initiate a cascade failure, widen it permanently." Naruto's eyes narrowed. He formed a Rasen shuriken in each hand, the screeching orbs of wind chakra illuminating his furious face with a blue-white light. He hurled them both, a twin cataclysm of cutting wind. The leader didn't dodge. It crossed all four arms, and a larger, more solid dome of the gray energy shimmered into existence. The Rasen shuriken struck in a deafening, concussive blast of light and howling wind. The ground for 10 feet around the leader cratered. When the dust and energy cleared, the shield was a spiderweb of cracks, and the leader was wounded, smoking, one arm hanging useless, a deep fracture across its chest, but it was still standing, still moving. It was terrifyingly powerful. It was now only 20 feet from the tear. The swirling vortex seemed to reach for it, the colors pulsing faster. "Sasuke!" Naruto yelled, already forming another Rasengan. "I see it." Sasuke's Rinnegan glowed. He prepared to use a Menotejikara, to swap places with the creature and put himself in the line of fire. Peter saw it all from his perch. The wounded but unstoppable leader. The tear, throbbing like an infected wound. His spider sense was a single, sustained siren of doom focused entirely on the connection between the two. His mind, trained in physics and desperate improvisation, raced. The tear is an instability. The leader is a key. Insert key, lock opens forever. Break the key, or jam the lock. He had no chakra. His webs were ineffective. But he had momentum. He had geometry. And he had one last, desperate idea. He didn't plan. He reacted. He shot two web lines not at the creature, but at the sturdiest-looking trees on opposite sides of the clearing, framing the tear. Then, with a strength born of pure adrenaline, he pulled. Not in an arc. Not in a swing. He launched himself like a human bullet, in a straight, screaming line directly at the swirling heart of the tear itself. He passed right over the leader's head, a blur of color. "Parker, no!" Naruto's roar of horror cut through the battle noise. Peter ignored it. As he flew, upside down, he twisted his body. Both wrists aimed at the chaotic center of the anomaly. He didn't fire impact webbing or swing lines. He switched to a different cartridge with a mental command, the taser web setting, but modified. A continuous, thick stream of a specialized, conductive adhesive gel, designed to short-circuit electronics. It was the densest, stickiest, most cohesive fluid his web shooters could produce. THWIP. It was like trying to plug a raging fire hose with bubblegum. The streams of white fluid hit the chaotic energy of the tear and instantly began to vaporize at the edges, sizzling with a sound like frying bacon and releasing a smell of burnt sugar and ozone. But at the core, where the streams crossed and piled upon themselves, they held. Just for a second. Then another layer sealed over the vaporizing hole. He was patching a ruptured dam with tissue paper, but he was doing it faster than the energy could burn through. The tear's light flickered violently, strobing the clearing in a nauseating strobe. The hum became a strained, choked gurgle. The pull from the tear lessened. The leader, mere feet from touching it, let out a scream of pure, universe-spanning rage and reached a claw up to swat the irritating fly that was ruining eons of purpose. Peter was out of web fluid. The cartridges clicked empty. He was suspended in midair for a heart-stopping moment, directly over the tear, defenseless, the world a dizzying smear below him. A blur of orange and black. Naruto was there, having pushed past his own line, moving faster than thought. He intercepted the killing claw not with a Rasengan, but with his own chakra-coated forearm. The impact was a crack like a mountain splitting, sending a shockwave of force that flattened the ash in a circle around them. Naruto gritted his teeth, holding against the immense, cold strength. A flash of purple lightning. Sasuke's Chidori, shaped into a spear, materialized in his hand. He didn't throw it. He teleported, using a Menotejikara to appear behind the distracted leader, and drove the spear of lightning clean through its fractured chest core from behind. The energy erupted from its front in a shower of glowing, crystalline shards. The leader froze. Its grinding voice cut off. Then, from the point of impact, it exploded inward into a super-dense cloud of inert, gray, silicate powder that rained down like gritty snow. As if a switch had been flipped, every remaining creature in the clearing shuddered in unison. They collapsed where they stood, dissolving into identical piles of dust. The psychic pressure of the spider sense vanished from Peter's mind, leaving a ringing silence. The sudden quiet was heavier than the noise had been. The tear was still there, but it was diminished. Smaller, maybe 6 feet tall now, and quieter, its hum a faint, unstable whimper. Its center was patched haphazardly with a grotesque, smoking crust of half-vaporized, carbonized spiderwebs that glistened like a black scab under the moonlight. Peter's momentum ran out. He dropped like a stone, hitting the ashen ground in a clumsy roll that sent fresh agony blazing from his ribs. He ended up on his knees, coughing, sucking in huge, ragged gulps of the cold, tainted air. The numbness in his side was spreading, a slow, creeping chill seeping toward his core. Naruto landed beside him with a soft thud, his Hokage cloak torn, his forearm already bruising a deep purple. He looked from the patched, wounded tear to Peter, his blue eyes wide with a mixture of awe, relief, and stark horror. You insane, you could have been unraveled. Erased from every reality. Peter pulled his mask off, his face pale and slick with cold sweat. He gave a shaky, breathless laugh that was half a sob. Yeah. Seemed like a good idea at the time. He coughed again, a dry, hacking sound. Temporary fix. Needs a proper patch. I need to make more web fluid. Got any potassium nitrate, carbon tetrachloride, and a really, really good fume hood? He tried to push himself up, and his left arm buckled. He looked down at the graze on his side. He pulled the torn edges of the suit aside. The skin beneath wasn't bleeding. It wasn't red or bruised. It was gray. The color of the creature's skin. A patch about the size of a silver dollar, perfectly circular, with a texture like fine pumice stone. And from its edges, tiny, hair-thin filaments of crystalline growth were spreading under his skin, visible as faint, shimmering lines tracing up his ribs and down toward his hip. A slow, invasive chill radiated from it, a cold that his enhanced metabolism couldn't fight. He touched it. It was numb. Dead. And getting bigger. Guys, he said, his voice suddenly small, all the bravado gone. He looked up at Naruto, his eyes wide with a fear deeper than any he'd felt facing aliens or madmen. I don't think the bad touch washed off. His vision swam. The gray patch seemed to pulse in time with the dying tear's whimper. The world tilted. Naruto lunged forward and caught him as his eyes rolled back and he slumped forward, utterly boneless. The Hokage's hands, so strong against the monster's claw, felt frighteningly fragile as they cradled the strangely cold, too light body of the hero from another world. Sakura. Naruto bellowed, his voice raw, carrying to the edges of the clearing. We need Sakura now. The battle was won. The horror had just taken root. Inside Peter Parker. And it was growing. Chapter 4, The Graying. Konoha General Hospital, Isolation Wing, 3:17 a.m. The silence in the sterile observation room was a physical thing, thick and cold as poured resin. It was broken only by the rhythmic, too slow beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor and the faint, labored rasp of Peter Parker's breathing through an oxygen mask. Beyond the reinforced glass, in the isolation chamber, he lay on a bed stripped of all but the most essential medical equipment. The room was lit by the soft, green glow of multiple medical ninjutsu seals painted on the walls and floor, barrier seals, purification arrays, chakra stasis fields. They pulsed in a slow, hypnotic rhythm that did nothing to soothe the watchers. Naruto stood with his forehead pressed against the cool glass, his breath fogging a small circle. He'd scrubbed the ash and grit from his face, but his Hokage robe was still torn at the sleeve, the bruise on his forearm a lurid tapestry of purple and black. The sight of Peter, so vibrantly alive and irritatingly talkative just hours before, now lying still and gray-tinged, twisted something deep in his gut. Sakura stood beside a bank of monitors, her arms crossed tightly. Her medical coat was pristine, but her face was etched with a profound, professional frustration. Tsunade, the fifth Hokage and greatest medic in the world, stood on the other side of the glass inside the chamber itself. Her hands were sheathed in a brilliant, sun-yellow chakra glow as she passed them over Peter's torso, her brow furrowed in concentration that bordered on fury. "Report," Naruto said, his voice rough. "It's not a disease. It's not a poison. It's not even a curse in the traditional sense," Sakura said, her voice clipped. "It's a transmutation. A fundamental rewriting of his biological material at a cellular level, following the pathways of that foreign energy contamination." On the monitor, a magnified chakra image of Peter's skin cells was displayed. Healthy cells glowed a soft blue. The infected area was a spreading stain of static gray. Where they met, Sakura pointed with a trembling finger. "See? The healthy cells aren't being killed. They're being converted. The cellular structure is breaking down and recoalescing into a silicate-based matrix. It's mimicking the composition of those creatures." "Can you stop it?" Naruto asked, not taking his eyes off Peter's still form. "We're trying every known purification and regeneration jutsu," Tsunade's voice came through a speaker, strained. "My creation rebirth can outpace almost any cellular damage. But this, my chakra accelerates it. It feeds the conversion. The foreign energy uses any applied chakra as fuel." She withdrew her hands, the yellow glow dying. For a moment, she looked every one of her years, her shoulders slumping. "It's like trying to put out a grease fire with water. We're making it worse." The beep, beep, beep of the monitor seemed to grow slower. "Is he awake?" Naruto asked softly. "In and out of a fevered delirium," Sakura said. "His metabolism is fighting it, hard. It's the only thing slowing the spread. But it's a war of attrition his body is losing. The core temperature around the infection site is 22 degrees Celsius. Room temperature. It's not just cold, it's thermodynamically dead." Inside the chamber, Peter's head twitched on the pillow. A low mumble escaped the oxygen mask. "Circuit's feedback loop needs a neutral conductor, not an insulator. The frequency's all wrong, May." His right hand, the one not sporting an 4, twitched, fingers moving as if manipulating invisible tools. His scientific mind, even drowning in a fever dream, was still working the problem. "He's talking about his world science," Shikamaru said from the doorway. He looked more exhausted than any of them, dark circles like bruises under his eyes. He held a scroll covered in frantic notes. "I've been analyzing the battle data and the residual energy from the patched tier. Sasuke's initial assessment was correct, but incomplete. Those entities weren't invaders. They were cleaners." He unfurled the scroll on a side table. "The convergence they spoke of, it's not an event they're causing. It's an event they're responding to. Like white blood cells to an infection. Our dimension and Peter's dimension, colliding or brushing against each other created an impurity. A flaw in the dimensional fabric. Their purpose is to sterilize that flaw. To burn out the foreign energy, which includes chakra, and whatever radiation Peter's body carries from his universe. They weren't trying to conquer. They were trying to delete." "So Peter," Naruto began, dread coiling tighter. "Is the epicenter of the infection in their eyes," Shikamaru finished grimly. "And now he's been directly contaminated by their essence. His body is becoming the very thing they seek to erase. He's turning into a walking convergence point." The implication hung in the air, colder than the isolation chamber. If they couldn't cure him, he would either die as a man, or fully transform into one of those stone creatures. And if he did, the cleaners would return in unimaginable force to wipe the infection, and likely everything around it, from existence. "There has to be a way," Naruto said, turning from the glass, his jaw set. "He fought for us. He's one of us now. We don't abandon our own." "His own science," Sakura murmured, staring at Peter's twitching fingers. "He said our chakra makes it worse. What if the answer isn't in our medicine, but in his? In a neutral conductor?" Just then, Peter's eyes shot open behind the mask. They were glassy with fever, but for a second, they focused with terrifying clarity on Tsunade. He tried to speak, the words muffled. Tsunade leaned close, pulling the mask aside slightly. Vibrational counterfrequency, he rasped, each word an effort. The crystal, it has a resonant lattice. Like the cluster in 85. Sonic disruption. You're using DC, needs AC, reverse the polarity, his eyes lost focus, rolling back. Uncle Ben. I'm sorry, it's so cold. He fell unconscious again, his breathing shallower. Tsunade straightened up, her face a mask of clinical analysis. He's giving us a theory. He's saying the transformation has a structure. A pattern. And that pattern can be shattered, if we find the right frequency. Not with blunt force chakra, but with precise energy modulation. We don't have his technology, Sakura said, despair creeping into her voice. No, Shikamaru said slowly, his eyes widening. But we have something else. We have Fuinjutsu. Sealcraft. It's not about power, it's about pattern. About writing a specific, counteracting command onto reality itself. He looked at Naruto, a spark of the old, brilliant fire in his tired eyes. He can't tell us the frequency. But if we can map the infection's pattern as it spreads, we might be able to deduce it. And then, we write a seal that sings the song that shatters the crystal. It was a mad, desperate plan. A fusion of alien science and shinobi mysticism. It hinged on Peter's body holding out long enough for them to learn its enemy's language. Do it, Naruto said, without hesitation. Whatever you need. Everyone in R&D, every seal master, is at your disposal. We need to map it in real time, Sakura said, moving to a console. I'll use a modified diagnostic jutsu. It'll be agonizing for him, and it will likely accelerate the spread as we probe it. It's a risk. Naruto looked back through the glass at the young man who had web-slung into their nightmare. He'd say it's the only risk worth taking. He placed his palm flat against the glass. Hey! Spider-Man. You hear that? We're building a better mousetrap. So you hang on. That's an order. There was no response but the slow, stubborn beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor. Konoha Archives, Secret Fuinjutsu Vault, 6:45 a.m. The air here was different, the dry, sacred smell of ancient ink, cedarwood boxes, and the faint, ozone-tinged residue of powerful, dormant seals. Shikamaru, flanked by two elderly seal masters with eyes like faded ink wells, pored over scrolls detailing harmonic resonance theory applied to barrier breaking. Sasuke stood apart, his Rinnegan active, studying a three-dimensional chakra projection of the infection spread pattern Sakura was feeding to a crystal orb. The pattern was horrifyingly beautiful, a fractal, icy bloom of gray lines expanding from the wound site. It's not random, Sasuke stated. It follows a geometric progression. A seed crystal, propagating outward. Each branch is at a precise 72-degree angle to the last. It's mathematical. Mathematics we can work with, one of the seal masters, Elder Kahaku, croaked. His gnarled fingers traced the air above the projection. We can design a containment seal with a reverse harmonic cascade. Instead of containing energy, it would emit a standing wave of disruptive vibration. But the carrier wave, we need an energy source it cannot consume. Chakra is food for it. He said, reverse the polarity, Shikamaru mused, rubbing his temples. What if we don't use chakra at all as the power source? What if we use the infection itself? The others stared at him. A feedback loop, Sasuke understood first. A seal that uses the infection's own transformative energy as fuel for the disruptive frequency. It turns its own power against it. It's never been done, Elder Kahaku breathed, a mix of terror and excitement in his voice. To write a seal that actively metabolizes an external, hostile energy, the complexity is astronomical. One flaw, and it would catalyze the transformation instantly. We have the best minds in Konoha, and a living schematic of the enemy, Shikamaru said, gesturing to the projection. And we have a subject who understands the principle, even if he can't articulate it. We work until we have a draft. Then we test it. On who? The other elder asked. Shikamaru looked toward the hospital wing. On the only volunteer we have. Isolation chamber, 11:30 a.m. Peter surfaced from the cold fog of delirium into a world of pain and strange sensation. The numbness was gone, replaced by a deep, itching, burning cold that radiated from his side through his entire body. He could feel it, the grayness, like a parasite made of ice crawling through his veins. He saw blurred shapes moving beyond the glass. He heard the muffled, urgent tones of a debate. His spider sense, dampened and distorted by the infection, tingled not with warning, but with a strange, potential energy. Like the moment before a spark jumps a gap. Sakura's face swam into view above him. Her expression was stern, but her eyes were kind. Peter. Can you understand me? We have a theory. A way to fight this. But we need to understand its pattern better. The jutsu I'm about to use will hurt. It will feel like needles of ice tracing your insides. But it will give us the map we need. Do you consent? Consent. A word from a world of ethics committees and informed consent forms. It felt absurd here, now. Peter tried to nod, but his neck muscles felt stiff, half stone. He managed a weak thumbs up with his free hand. Sakura nodded. Her hands glowed not green, but a pale, silvery blue. Diagnostic mapping, depth scar analysis. The moment the chakra touched him, the cold parasite inside him shrieked. It was a silent, internal scream of violation that echoed in Peter's mind. The itching burning exploded into outright agony. It felt as if his very cells were being individually frozen and scanned. He arched off the bed, a choked gasp escaping the mask. His vision whited out. He saw patterns, crystalline lattices, spiraling fractals, equations of decay written in a language of frost. He didn't know how long it lasted. It felt like an eternity in a diamond vise. When Sakura pulled back, panting with effort, he collapsed back onto the sheets, trembling violently. The gray patch on his skin had visibly expanded by an inch. On the console outside, the crystal orb now projected a stunningly detailed, three-dimensional map of the infection, glowing malevolently in the dim room. We have it, Shikamaru's voice came through, breathless with triumph and horror. We have the full pattern. Now, we write the cure. Peter, swimming in a sea of pain, heard the words. A thought, clear and desperate, cut through the fog. Not a cure. A countervirus. He tried to speak, to tell them about phage therapy, about using a virus to kill a bacteria, but his tongue was a slab of meat in his mouth. All he could do was watch as the brilliant, desperate minds of Konoha began to design a weapon of salvation, using his own dying body as the blueprint. The race was no longer just against the infection. It was against the very concept of oblivion. And in the silent, sterile room, the beep, beep, beep of the monitor marked the passing seconds of a life slowly turning to stone. Chapter 5, The Seal of Shattered Song. Konoha Archives, Secret Fuinjutsu Vault, 4:08 p.m. Time had lost meaning in the windowless vault. The air, once sacred and still, now crackled with intellectual frenzy and the sharp, acrid smell of burnt ozone from repeated, failed seal activations. Scrolls lay unfurled like fallen soldiers across every surface, covered in frantic annotations that blended traditional Fuinjutsu script with Spider-Man's delirious scientific notations, fractal equations, frequency harmonics, terms like lattice resonance, and destructive interference. Shikamaru stared at the central drafting table, his eyes bloodshot. Before him was the final design, rendered on chakra-reactive parchment. It was not a seal in any traditional sense. It lacked the elegant, sweeping curves of a containment seal or the bold, angular lines of an explosive tag. This was a monstrosity of geometry, a concentric nightmare of interlocking, jagged fractals, a snowflake designed by a mad mathematician. At its heart was a void, a negative space shaped exactly like the infection's propagation pattern Sakura had mapped. Around it swirled inscriptions not of command, but of cancellation. The seal of shattered song, Elder Kahaku whispered, his voice filled with awe and terror. He traced a trembling finger over a line that seemed to vibrate on the page. It doesn't command chakra. It inverts a specific, invasive energy signature. It turns the enemy's own song into a scream that tears it apart. The theory is sound, Sasuke said, his Rinnegan passively absorbing the complex data of the seal. He stood like a dark lodestone in the corner. But the activation trigger is the problem. The seal must be keyed to the infection's unique frequency at the moment of application. A millisecond of misalignment, and it becomes a catalyst, not a cure. We need a sensor of impossible precision, Shikamaru muttered, massaging his temples. Something that can lock onto the infection's energy in real time and tune the seal instantly. A memory surfaced. Naruto, in the Hokage's office, recounting the first meeting. He knew I was coming. He yelled down before the branch even fell. He moves before anything happens. His spider sense, Shikamaru said, straightening up. It's a preternatural danger awareness. But at the tear, it reacted specifically to the creature's energy. It didn't just warn him of danger, it identified the source. It's a biological sensor tuned to extra-dimensional threats. You propose to use the victim's own nervous system as the tuning fork? Elder Kahaku asked, aghast. The strain could shatter his mind. Or the seal, interacting with that sense, could burn it out permanently. It's the only sensor we have that can perceive the frequency, Shikamaru said, his face grim. And he's running out of time. The infection has reached his sternum. Sakura estimates he has 12 hours before major organ transmutation begins. The decision hung in the ozone-tinged air. It was a gamble with a man's soul as the stakes. "We ask him," Naruto's voice came from the doorway. He entered, still in his torn robe, his presence filling the claustrophobic space. "It's his life. His power. We explain the risk, and we ask." Isolation chamber, 5:45 p.m. Peter was floating in a gray sea. The cold wasn't just in his body now, it was in his thoughts, slowing them, making them crystalline and brittle. He could hear his own heartbeat, a sluggish, echoing thump in the stone cavern of his chest. The spider sense, his constant companion since the bite, was a distorted mess, a continuous, low-level scream of wrongness that was now inside him, coming from him. Voices pierced the fog. Naruto's, warm and solid. Sakura's, clinical but gentle. They explained the seal. The theory. The desperate, beautiful gamble. They explained the role of his spider sense. "Could burn it out," Sakura was saying. "You might lose it forever. Or the feedback could cause neurological cascades. We don't know." Peter tried to focus. To think past the ice in his synapses. His spider sense. The pain in the neck that had saved him, and MJ, and May, and countless strangers on a subway 1,000 times. The curse that kept him awake at night, feeling every potential fall of a pigeon in a 5-block radius. His personal, private hell and guardian angel. Without it, would I still be Spider-Man? The thought was more terrifying than the grayness. To be powerless again. To be ordinary, while knowing what lurked in the shadows. But then he saw Naruto's face, pressed against the glass hours before. He saw the Jonin being dragged into the shadows. He felt the cold purpose of the four-armed leader. This wasn't about being Spider-Man. This was about being Peter Parker. And Peter Parker didn't let other people die if he could help it. Even if the cost was everything. He lifted his left hand, the one not yet touched by the creeping gray. He made a shaky, "okay" sign. Then he pointed to his own temple, and then made a slashing motion across his throat. "Do it. Even if it kills the sense." Naruto understood. His blue eyes glistened for a second before hardening with resolve. "All right. Get ready." Preparatory room, 7:30 p.m. The atmosphere was that of a surgery mixed with an arcane ritual. Peter had been moved to a circular chamber lined with sound-dampening seals. In the center, he sat upright on a stone chair, held in place by gentle but unyielding bands of chakra light. The upper half of his suit had been cut away, revealing the horrific, beautiful fractal of gray stone spreading from his left side across his chest, its edges shimmering with minute crystal growth. The room was cold enough to see their breath. Tsunade, Sakura, and 2 senior mednin stood at readiness, their hands glowing with restorative chakra, prepared to stabilize his body the moment the seal took effect. Shikamaru and Elder Kahaku stood before him, holding the parchment of the seal of shattered song. The ink glowed with a faint, hungry silver light. Sasuke stood directly behind Peter's chair, his Rinnegan activated. "My role is to observe the interaction at the dimensional level. I will narrate the alignment. You must apply the seal the instant I confirm the frequency lock." Naruto stood at Peter's side, a hand on his non-petrified shoulder. "You ready, Spider-Man?" Peter, his skin pale and beaded with cold sweat, gave a jerky nod. His whole body was trembling, not from fear, but from the violent, internal war between his hypercharged metabolism and the silencing frost. "Do it. Play me the song that ends the gray." Shikamaru took a deep breath. He and Elder Kahaku placed the parchment against Peter's chest, directly over the epicenter of the infection. The moment the chakra-reactive paper touched the gray skin, the intricate design began to glow brighter, pulsing in time with Peter's slow heartbeat. "Now, Peter," Shikamaru said, his voice low and intense. "Don't fight it. Don't guide it. Just let your spider sense feel the infection. Open yourself to it completely." It was the worst instruction Peter had ever been given. To willingly embrace the thing that was killing him. He closed his eyes. He let down every mental barrier. He stopped fighting the cold, the wrongness, the screaming in his nerves. He listened. The spider sense, no longer fighting the infection, fused with it. The internal scream of wrongness clarified into a single, pure, devastating note. A frequency of erasure, of nullification. It was the sound of the void between stars. It vibrated in every cell of his being. Frequency isolated. Sasuke's voice was sharp. It's coherent. And immense. "Seal is absorbing the signature, now." Elder Kahaku chanted, his hands moving in a final, complex sign over the parchment. The seal of shattered song flashed. The silver light didn't just glow, it sang. A soundless vibration that made the air in the room shimmer like a heat haze. The intricate lines of the seal burned themselves off the parchment and into Peter's skin, etching directly over and through the gray fractal. For Peter, the universe became pain. But it was a new pain. Not the cold, silencing numbness. This was the pain of shattering glass, of a symphony played backward at catastrophic volume. The silent, gray note of the infection was met by the seal's screaming, silver counterfrequency. They clashed inside him, in his bones, in his soul. He threw his head back, a silent scream tearing from his throat. The stone chair cracked beneath him. The gray pattern on his chest began to vibrate. A fine network of hairline fractures appeared across its surface. "It's working!" Sakura cried. "The silicate matrix is destabilizing." But the spider sense was the battleground. Peter felt it straining, magnifying both frequencies, acting as the resonant chamber for this war of annihilation. He felt it tearing. A sensation like the finest, most essential thread in the tapestry of his being beginning to snap, fiber by fiber. A part of him was dying. The part that always knew when to duck. "Goodbye, old friend," he thought, through the maelstrom of agony. "Thanks for everything." With a final, silent ping that only he could hear, the thread snapped. At that exact moment, the gray fractal on his chest exploded outward in a cloud of fine, warm, gray dust. The horrible cold vanished, replaced by a flood of fiery, healing pain as his natural metabolism roared back to life, attacking the damage left behind. The skin revealed underneath was raw, pink, and bleeding, but it was skin. Human. Alive. Peter slumped forward in the shattered chair, unconscious, breathing in deep, ragged, warm breaths. The monitor, freed from the infection's slowing effect, began to beep in a rapid, healthy rhythm. Silence, profound and stunned, filled the chamber. Tsunade was the first to move, her hands slamming glowing green chakra onto Peter's back to stabilize him, to heal the brutal trauma of the battle fought inside his cells. Vitals stabilizing. The foreign energy signature is gone. He's clear. Naruto let out a breath he felt he'd been holding for days. He looked at Shikamaru, who was staring at his own hands in disbelief, then at the pile of inert gray dust on the floor. Sasuke deactivated his Rinnegan, a rare look of exhaustion on his face. The frequency is silenced. The infection is eradicated. And his extrasensory perception, the dimensional resonance it operated on, is gone. Severed. They had saved his life. At the cost of his power. Recovery room, 11 p.m. Peter awoke to warmth. Actual, blessed, blanket and body heat warmth. He was in a soft bed in a dimly lit room. The omnipresent hum of Konoha at night was a soothing blanket of sound. He took a deep breath. Air. Just air. No ozone, no sterile cold, no whispering void. He felt light. Empty. And profoundly ordinary. He slowly sat up. No pain. His side was tender, wrapped in clean bandages, but the deep, cellular cold was gone. He looked around. Naruto was asleep in a chair in the corner, head lolled back, snoring softly. On a table beside his bed sat a bowl of untouched ramen and a small, strange device, a kunai with a complex seal wrapped around its handle. But he noticed something else. Or rather, he didn't notice. The world was quiet. Not silent. He could hear Naruto's snores, the rustle of leaves outside, the drip of a faucet. But the other layer was gone. The constant, subconscious prickle at the base of his skull that painted the world in vectors of threat and safety. The psychic map was blank. He was blind. He closed his eyes, trying to summon it, to feel for the presence of the sleeping Hokage in the corner. Nothing. Just darkness behind his eyelids. A wave of grief, sudden and overwhelming, hit him. It was like losing a limb, a sense. He was naked in a dangerous world. He was Peter Parker, the kid who got bitten by a spider. Not Spider-Man. The door slid open quietly. Sakura entered, holding a medical chart. She saw he was awake and gave him a small, genuine smile. "Welcome back. How do you feel?" "Warm," he said, his voice hoarse. "And quiet." Her smile softened with understanding and pity. "The procedure was a success. The infection is completely purged. Your body is healing at an incredible rate. But..." Sasuke confirmed it. "The energy channel that facilitated your precognitive sense was fused to the infection's frequency. The seal had to sever it to break the pattern." Peter nodded, looking down at his hands. "They were just hands." "I know. I felt it go." He tried to sound brave, nonchalant. It came out flat. Small price to pay. It is not a small price, Naruto said, awake now, his blue eyes serious in the dim light. You sacrificed a part of yourself for this world. That makes you Konoha, in my book. And we look after our own. Peter looked at him, then at the sealed kunai on the table. What's that? A communication seal, Shikamaru said, entering behind Sakura. He looked exhausted but satisfied. Temporary. Once you're recovered, we have a new problem. The tear is still there. Patched, but unstable. And now we know it's a symptom, not the disease. The convergence is still happening somewhere. We need to find the source. And for that, he looked at Peter pointedly, we need your mind. Not your spider sense. Your science. Your knowledge of the energy that brought you here. You're not just a visitor anymore, Peter Parker. You're our resident expert on dimensional anomalies. It was a lifeline. A purpose. They weren't dismissing him as a depowered invalid. They needed him. Peter Parker. A slow, real smile touched his lips. It was tired, and sad for what was lost, but it was real. Well, he said, his voice gaining a little of its old rhythm. I did get an in Mr. Warren's physics class. Though I mostly used it to calculate swing trajectories. He looked at Naruto. So, what's the plan, boss? Naruto's foxy grin returned. First, you eat that ramen. Then, we get to work. We've got a hole in the world to close, and I have a feeling the instructions aren't written in any of our scrolls. Peter picked up the chopsticks. The world was quiet. He was ordinary. But he was alive. And he had a job to do. The adventure had changed him forever. The horror had left its mark, not on his skin, but on his soul. Now, the real work began. Chapter 6, The Resonance of Two Worlds. Hokage's office, 1 week later, 9:14 a.m. The morning sun streamed into the office, painting warm gold stripes across a new, chaotic landscape. The mountain of traditional scrolls had been pushed aside, replaced by a sprawling, improvised mess that was pure Peter Parker. Whiteboards stolen from the academy leaned against bookshelves, covered in frantic equations, diagrams of the Einstein-Rosen bridge concept, and crude sketches of the vault anomaly. Components of his web shooters lay disassembled on a silk cloth next to a bowl of half-eaten ramen. The air smelled of ozone, ink, ramen broth, and the peculiar, clean scent of the chakra-conductive ink Shikamaru had procured. Peter stood before the largest whiteboard, wearing a borrowed, slightly too large green Konoha flak jacket over a black shirt. His face was still pale, the shadows under his eyes pronounced, but his hands moved with fluid certainty as he connected lines of theory. The physical weakness was fading, but the new, profound quiet in his mind was a constant, unnerving presence. He'd catch himself instinctively flinching at a sudden noise, only to realize it was just a door slamming, not a premonition. The problem, he said, tapping the board with a marker, isn't just punching a hole between point A and point B. That's what your Hiraishin does on a microscale, and what some seriously sketchy magic does back home. This convergence is a sustained bleed. It's like two sheets of reality being pressed together until they fuse. The tear isn't the cause, it's a blister. A symptom of pressure. Naruto leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, watching with fascinated confusion. Shikamaru stood beside Peter, his sharp eyes following the math. Sasuke, by the window, observed in silence. Pressure from what? Naruto asked. From the things brushing against each other, Peter said, circling two overlapping circles on the board labeled Dimension N, Chakra, and Dimension M, Unknown Energy. My world has events. Big, universe-shaking kabooms. Infinity stones snapping. Celestials waking up. The Scarlet Witch rewriting reality on a Tuesday. Each one sends shockwaves through the local space-time continuum. Your world, from what I've gathered, has had its own share of reality-bending kabooms. He looked pointedly at Naruto and Sasuke. Kagaya. The God Tree. The Otsutsuki. That's not just power, that's dimensional-level manipulation. Shikamaru's eyes widened. You're saying the foundational traumas of our respective worlds are resonating? Like two tuning forks, miles apart, suddenly humming at the same frequency? And creating a sympathetic vibration in the fabric between them, Peter finished, a thrill of collaborative discovery cutting through his personal grief. Yes. The bank vault, glowy thing, wasn't the source. It was a thin spot. A place where the resonance focused enough to become a pinprick. When I touched it, I didn't open it, I was a conductive particle that got sucked through the weak point. Sasuke spoke, his voice cutting through the theory. Then the cleaners are part of a dimensional immune system. They target the resonant frequencies, the foreign energy, to stop the fusion. Exactly. Peter said, turning to him. They're not evil. They're cosmic leukocytes. But their cure is total sterilization. They don't see civilizations or people, they see infection vectors. The weight of the realization settled over the room. They weren't facing an invasion. They were patients in a cosmic surgery where the surgeon's tools were genocide. So how do we stop it? Naruto asked, his voice low. We can't just unhave our history. We don't stop the resonance, Peter said, a familiar, crazy glint in his eye, the one that usually appeared before he built a web shooter out of scrap or attacked a winged guy on a glider. We change the tune. We create a counter-resonance. A seal, but on a planetary scale. Something that emits a stabilizing frequency, telling the fabric of reality here to vibrate differently. To be incompatible with the frequency from my world. It would heal the blister and reinforce the wall. Shikamaru stared at him. A planetary scale harmonic seal. The sheer chakra requirement. It's impossible. It would take the combined power of every shinobi who ever lived, focused through a matrix of unimaginable complexity. Peter grinned. It was a tired, but real, Spider-Man grin. Who said anything about using chakra as the power source? He walked to the table and picked up one of his empty web fluid cartridges. We use the resonance itself. We build a reality tuning fork. We anchor it at the tear, the point of highest resonance. It draws in the disruptive vibrational energy and transforms it into a stabilizing pulse. It turns the disease into its own antibody. A seal that feeds on the problem to solve the problem, Shikamaru breathed, the troublesome spark igniting into a blaze in his eyes. Like the shattered song, but macro scale. It's theoretically possible. We'd need materials that can withstand and channel that kind of transdimensional energy, Sasuke said. Nothing in this world is inherently attuned to his. Peter's smile turned wry. About that. My web fluid. The original formula. It's a biopolymer based on, well, me. On the radioactive spider that bit me. That spider was a genetic experiment bombarded with a unique particle radiation. The same radiation that sometimes infuses people and things in my world with weirdness. My webs, my body before the cure, they all carried a faint signature of that other dimensional energy. He held up the cartridge. It's a material native to both sides of the resonance. It could be the perfect conductor. Naruto looked from Peter's determined face to Shikamaru's calculating one to Sasuke's assessing gaze. He slammed a fist into his palm. All right. We build a big, world-saving tuning fork. What do we need? Peter's list was extensive and bizarre. I need a lab. Not a medical one, a mad science one. I need to synthesize a massive batch of web fluid base, which requires specific chemicals, some of which I'll have to approximate with whatever alchemical substitutes you've got. I need conductive metals, gold, copper, maybe that chakra metal you use. I need a geometrically perfect chamber built around the tear itself. And, he added, his expression turning serious, I need data. Precise measurements of the tear's energy fluctuations. I need to hear the song it's singing, in perfect detail. I can provide the data, Sasuke said. The Rinnegan perceives dimensional layers. I can map the fluctuations. And I'll handle materials and construction, Shikamaru said, already pulling out a scroll to start delegating. We'll have the entire village's logistical support. And I, Naruto said, standing up, his presence filling the room with unwavering certainty, will make sure you have everything you need. This is Konoha's mission now. He looked at Peter. You said you're our expert. So lead the way, expert. For the first time since waking up powerless, Peter felt a surge of something akin to his old purpose. It was different. It was slower, intellectual, collaborative. It required trusting others with the science, with the protection he used to handle himself. It was terrifying. And it was exactly what he needed. The new Nakano River Research Facility, aka, the Web, 2 days later. The clearing had been transformed. A large, circular, open-air structure of polished wood and gleaming metal had been erected around the patched tier, now under a constant guard of Jonin. It looked like a hybrid of a Shinto shrine and a particle accelerator. In the center, the tier still shimmered, its spiderweb patch holding but looking increasingly strained. Peter, dressed in a practical navy blue tunic and pants, moved through the controlled chaos. He was directing teams with a focus that surprised even him. No, the copper filaments need to be braided, not twisted. The harmonic integrity depends on uniform conductance. He sniffed a batch of bubbling liquid in a glass alembic, heated by a careful fire-style user. Close, but the toluene substitute has too many hydrocarbons. It'll polymerize too fast. Try the distillation again. He was in his element. The grief for his lost sense was a quiet background hum, drowned out by the immediate, all-consuming puzzle. He worked alongside Konoha's finest engineers and Fuinjutsu masters, translating his physics into their terms, learning theirs. He discovered that chakra-conductive ink could be modulated to carry specific frequencies, a discovery that made Elder Kahaku weep with joy. Sasuke stood immobile on a platform overlooking the tear, his Rinnegan active for hours at a time. He dictated a stream of data to an assistant with a scroll, fluctuation spike at 72.3 cycles, minor dimensional shear along the y-axis, the patch is degrading at a rate of 0.4% per hour. It was during a break, as Peter sat on the steps of the structure wiping grease from his hands with a rag, that a new voice entered his world. "You're the dimensional traveler." He looked up. A young woman stood there, about his age, with dark hair tied in a neat bun and intelligent, calm eyes. She wore a standard Jonin vest but with tool pouches that seemed excessively full. She held out a canteen. "You look like you could use water that doesn't smell like chemicals." "Thanks," Peter said, taking it. He drank deeply. "Peter Parker." 1010, she said, sitting beside him with a comfortable sigh. "Weapons specialist and logistics. I've been put in charge of procuring and fabricating the stranger items on your list." She gave him a sidelong look. "A gyroscopic stabilizer, made of chakra-reactive crystal? That was a fun afternoon." Peter winced. "Sorry. I'm used to just web-slinging to a Stark Industries R&D lab." "It's fine. It's interesting." She nodded toward the structure. "You're building a weapon to save the world, but you're not using a single sharp edge. It's all waves and frequencies. It's like fighting with music." Peter looked at her, truly looked. She wasn't looking at him with awe or pity. She was looking at his work. "Yeah. I guess it is. My old method was more, punch the bad guy until physics gives up." "I prefer projectile weapons myself," 1010 said, patting a scroll at her hip. "Direct. Understandable. But this? This is something else. It takes a different kind of bravery to fight with a theory." Her words were a balm he didn't know he needed. She saw him not as the depowered hero, not as the alien curiosity, but as an engineer on a crazy project. "It's scarier," he admitted quietly. "When you could feel the punches coming, you had some illusion of control. Now, I just have to hope the math is right." "The math is being checked by Shikamaru and every SEAL master we have," 1010 said pragmatically. "And you're being guarded by the Hokage and the last Uchiha. Your job is to be brilliant. Ours is to make sure you get to be." She stood up, brushing off her pants. "The refined orichalcum alloy for the primary resonator is ready for your inspection. It's in Forge 3. Try not to blow it up." She walked away, her posture straight and capable. Peter watched her go, a strange, warm feeling cutting through the ever-present chill of loss. It wasn't his spider sense. It was something else. Something human. He stood, a new resolve firming in his chest. He had a job to do. A song to write for a weeping universe. And maybe, for the first time, he didn't have to write it alone. The tuning fork was taking shape. The lonely, terrifying quiet in his mind was being filled, not with premonition, but with purpose, collaboration, and the steady, reassuring hum of a world fighting to save itself. Chapter 7, The Forge of Worlds. The Webb Research Facility, 10:22 a.m. The morning air over the Nakano River smelled of ozone, molten metal, and the sharp, clean scent of chakra-conductive polymers under stress. The open-air facility buzzed not with insects, but with controlled urgency. The central structure, now dubbed the resonator, was complete, a beautiful, terrifying sculpture of physics and faith. It was a triple helix of braided copper and sun-tempered steel, threaded with veins of glowing chakra-infused crystal, all converging on a central chamber that cradled the still-patched tear like a tumor in a geode. At 3 equidistant points around the structure, massive, tuning fork-like prongs of a shimmering, silvery alloy, the refined orichalcum, thrust towards the sky. Peter Parker stood at the central control dais, a makeshift console jury-rigged from Konoha communication tech and parts of his own dismantled web shooters. His borrowed flak jacket was open, sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms smudged with grease and etched with quick, fading notes in permanent ink. The profound quiet in his mind was now the canvas upon which he painted with data streams and calculations. "Primary capacitor array at 98% saturation," he called out, his voice echoing in the chamber. He no longer flinched at the sound of his own raised voice. The instinct to whisper, to hide, was fading with the immediacy of the work. "Shunt the overflow to the tertiary crystals. We need a smooth curve, not a spike." From a gantry above, 1010 leaned over, her hair tied back in a practical braid. "On it. Team 3, redirect the flow." Her commands were crisp, confident. Over the past days, she had become his indispensable right hand, translating his technobabble into actionable orders for the Konoha engineers. She understood the shape of his ideas even when the specifics baffled her. Peter's eyes were fixed on a series of glass orbs filled with a viscous, pearlescent liquid, his modified web fluid, now acting as bioreactive energy sensors. They glowed with a soft, internal light, throbbing in time with the tear's weakened pulse. Sasuke, stationed on a high platform with a direct line of sight to the anomaly, fed a constant, low stream of data. Resonance pattern is holding at sigma 7, Sasuke's calm voice intoned through a small amplification seal. The patch is degrading. Stress fractures are appearing along the web strand matrix. Estimate total failure in 48 hours. We'll be ready in 24, Peter muttered, more to himself than anyone. His fingers danced over the console, adjusting dials carved from seal stone. The loss of his spider sense was a void, but in its place was a hyper-awareness of tangible data, the hum of the capacitors, the temperature readouts from the orichalcum prongs, the precise wavelength of light emitted by the sensor orbs. It was a different kind of sense, built not on instinct but on measurement. And right now, every measurement was screaming that they were on the edge of a knife. Naruto and Shikamaru arrived, the Hokage's presence causing a subtle shift in the room's energy, a collective straightening of spines. Status report, Naruto said, his gaze sweeping over the humming, alien machinery. We're in the final calibration stage, Peter said, not looking up. The resonator is built. The theory is solid. Now we have to tune it to the exact counterfrequency of the convergence. Sasuke is giving us the song of the sickness. I'm writing the antidote. He finally glanced up, his eyes meeting Naruto's. The activation sequence is non-negotiable. Once we start, we can't stop. The resonator will draw energy directly from the tear. If we abort midway, the feedback could rip the hole wide open. Permanently. Shikamaru nodded slowly, his strategic mind weighing the finality. A point of no return. Understood. What's the ignition trigger? Peter pointed to a central slot on the console. It was shaped like a kunai hilt, but the interior was lined with complex microcircuits he'd etched using a laser-precise wind-style jutsu from a friendly chunin. It needs a burst of pure, stable energy to bootstrap the reaction. Not chakra, the resonator can't use chakra as a primer, or it'll sink to the wrong frequency. It needs. He hesitated. It needs a spark of the energy from your world, Tenten finished for him, descending the ladder to join them. She held out a small, sealed glass cylinder. Inside, a tiny filament glowed with a faint, familiar white light. We managed to isolate and concentrate a minute residual charge from the remains of your web shooter power cells. It's not much. It has to be perfect. Peter took the cylinder, his thumb brushing hers. A static shock jumped between them, making them both flinch. Sorry, they said in unison, and a faint, awkward smile touched both their faces. The moment was brief, shattered by the high-pitched whine of an overload warning. Capacitor 2 is oscillating, an engineer yelled. Peter was moving before the echo died. I need a grounding rod. Now. Not chakra-based, a physical one. He scrambled up the lattice frame of the resonator, his movements less graceful without his sense but still driven by desperate purpose. He reached a junction where arcing electricity, tinged with the tear's violet hue, was spitting from a connection. Tenten didn't hesitate. She unsealed a scroll from her thigh with a puff of smoke. In her hand appeared not a weapon, but a 10-foot solid iron rod, simple and unadorned. Will this do? Perfect. Toss it. She threw it like a javelin. Peter caught it, the impact bruising his palms, and without a second thought, he jammed the rod into the malfunctioning connection point. There was a deafening crack and a shower of sparks that rained down on them. The whining ceased, replaced by the steady, healthy hum of realigned systems. Peter hung from the lattice, breathing heavily, his hands singed. He looked down at Tenten, who was staring up, a smudge of soot on her cheek. Thanks, he said, his voice rough. Don't mention it, she said. Just part of the logistics. As he climbed down, Shikamaru approached, his expression grim. We have another problem. Not here. Long-range sensors have detected a second energy signature. Faint, but growing. 50 miles northeast, in the uninhabited mountains graveyard. It matches the pre-tier energy spike from the bank vault. A second convergence point. The sickness was metastasizing. The control room fell silent. The weight of the new threat was a physical pressure. We can't fight on two fronts, Naruto stated, his voice firm. We seal this one, now. Then we deal with the next. But the calibration isn't complete. Peter argued. We're at 90% accuracy. A 10% margin of error on a planetary scale harmonic seal could do anything from nothing to, well, making the Land of Fire sing soprano for a century. We don't have 48 hours, Sasuke called down, his Rinnegan still fixed on the tear. The fracture rate is accelerating. I now estimate catastrophic failure in 18 hours. The new anomaly's growth may be linked. They are feeding each other. It was a brutal calculus. Risk a premature activation with a high chance of failure or catastrophic side effects, or wait for perfection and risk two simultaneous, unstoppable ruptures. Peter's mind, the mind that had solved impossible problems mid-swing, raced. He looked at the console, at the glowing sensor orbs, at the desperate, trusting faces of the Konoha shinobi. He thought of May, of MJ, of Uncle Ben. Of the simple, profound responsibility he carried. "Give me 6 hours," he said, his voice suddenly calm, decisive. "I can get us to 98% accuracy. I can't get to 100 without more data from the new site, but 98, that's a risk I'm willing to bet the world on." "How?" Shikamaru asked. "By using the resonator itself as a probe," Peter said, a crazy plan solidifying. "We do a partial, low-power activation. Just enough to send a harmonic pulse towards the new site. The echo it sends back will give us the precise differential we need to complete the tuning. It's like sonar. But if the pulse is too weak, we get no data. Too strong, and we might destabilize the new site prematurely." "And the risk to this site?" Naruto pressed. "It'll put immense strain on the patch. Might shave a few hours off our deadline." Peter met his gaze. "It's a gamble. But it's a smarter gamble than guessing." Naruto held his stare for a long moment, then nodded. "Do it. Shikamaru, evacuate all non-essential personnel to a 5-mile perimeter. Sasuke, I need you to be our eyes on the dimensional stress. 10-10, you're with Peter. Whatever he needs." 10-10 nodded, moving to stand beside the console, her presence a steady anchor. The next 6 hours were a relentless, high-stakes ballet. Peter, working in a state of hyper-focused flow, adjusted the resonator's output with microscopic precision. 10-10 anticipated his needs, handing him tools, reading out metrics, her calm voice cutting through his tension. There was no time for awkwardness, only the seamless synergy of two minds focused on a single, world-saving task. At the end of the 6th hour, sweat-drenched and trembling with exhaustion, Peter inserted the glass cylinder into the console slot. It clicked home. The entire resonator thrummed with a deep, fundamental tone that vibrated in their teeth. "Pulse ready," Peter whispered. His finger hovered over the initiation seal. He looked at 10-10. She gave him a single, firm nod. He pressed it. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then, a beam of coherent, silent vibration, visible only as a rippling distortion in the air, lanced from the central chamber up into the sky, arcing towards the northeast. The resonator groaned. The patched tier bulged inward, the webbing stretching thin, glowing white-hot. Sasuke's voice was strained. "Dimensional shear at 150%. The patch is holding, but barely." The beam vanished. Silence. 2 seconds. 5. 10. Then, a faint, ghostly echo returned, not a sound, but a data stream that lit up Peter's console in a cascade of perfect, clarifying numbers. The missing 2%. "I have it!" Peter cried, his hands flying over the controls, inputting the final parameters. "Tuning complete. The final sequence is locked." He sagged against the console, a hysterical laugh bubbling in his chest. They had done it. They had the cure. But as the relieved smiles began to form, Sasuke's voice cut through again, colder than the void. The pulse was detected. And answered. The new anomaly, its growth rate just increased by an order of magnitude. And something is coming through. Something bigger. The gamble had paid off. And it had just summoned the surgeons. Chapter 8, The Surgeons Are Coming. The Webb Research Facility, 5:18 p.m. The air in the resonator chamber was now charged with a different kind of energy, not the hum of machinery, but the cold, sharp stillness of impending storm. The celebratory relief from the successful pulse had evaporated, replaced by a tactical dread that tasted like copper at the back of Peter's throat. The final tuning sequence was locked, a perfect antidote encoded in metal and light, ready to be administered. But the patient was now convulsing. On a newly erected tactical map table, Shikamaru's stone markers told a grim story. One marker, glowing a steady, sickly violet, represented their tier, the primary site. 50 miles northeast, a second marker pulsed with an angry, accelerating crimson light, the secondary site, in the mountain's graveyard. Arrows of chakra energy flow, sketched in luminescent ink, showed a feeding loop between them. The pulse was a beacon, Shikamaru said, his voice flat. It didn't just give us data. It told the cleaners exactly where the infection is most concentrated. They're not sending more foot soldiers. They're escalating. He placed a new marker, larger and black, at the secondary site. Sasuke's latest reconnaissance via Hawk confirms it. The new tear is larger, more unstable. And a signature is coalescing on the other side. A single, massive energy reading. Bigger than the four-armed leader. An order of magnitude bigger. Naruto's jaw was tight. A surgeon. Exactly, Shikamaru said. The scout cleaners failed to sterilize the initial infection. Now they're sending the equivalent of a cosmic scalpel. If it reaches either active tear, it will likely initiate a purge cascade. It won't just close the tears, it will likely excise a significant volume of space around them from reality to ensure that the contagion is removed. How long? Naruto asked. Sasuke estimates the entity will fully manifest in 6 to 8 hours. It will likely prioritize the larger, more active secondary site first. Peter stared at the black marker. His hands, still smudged with ink and grease, were steady, but inside, the old, familiar panic was rising. The panic he used to swing away from. Now he had to think through it. So we have a cure here, he said, pointing to the resonator. And a terminal diagnosis over there, about to get worse. We can't deploy the cure here if that thing is about to start cutting. The resonator's activation requires a stable, localized field. A purge cascade would shred it. And we can't move the resonator in time, Tenten added, her arms crossed as she studied the map. The components are too delicate, the harmonic alignment too precise to this specific location. Silence stretched, filled only by the low, ominous thrum of the waiting machine. Then Peter spoke, the words forming as he said them, a plan born of pure, desperate logic. We take the cure to the disease. Everyone looked at him. The resonator works by emitting a counter-frequency that stabilizes the local dimensional fabric, he explained, his mind racing. Its effect is radial, but strongest at the epicenter, the tear itself. If we activate it here, it heals this blister. But if we could, I don't know, throw the resonant core, the tuned essence of the device, into the heart of the secondary tier right as the surgeon is coming through. You'd be delivering the antidote directly into the bloodstream of the infection, Shikamaru finished, his eyes widening. And the resulting harmonic shockwave might not only seal that tear, but disrupt the entity's manifestation. Possibly destroy it. It's a bomb, Sasuke stated from the doorway. He had returned silently, his cloak dusted with ash from the distant graveyard. A harmonic bomb. The core would be consumed in the reaction. Peter nodded. Yeah. A one-shot, universe-tuned grenade. But we'd need to get it there. And arm it. And it would have to be perfectly timed. Minutes, maybe seconds, before the entity fully crosses over. Naruto's gaze swept the room, landing on each of them. A strike team. A small, fast team to deliver the package to the mountain's graveyard. Who? I have to go, Peter said immediately. Only I understand the arming mechanism and the timing. It's not a pull pin, it's a frequency trigger that has to be manually synced to the target tier's pulse at the last second. I'll provide transport and tactical support, Sasuke said. My Ameno Tajikara can cover ground instantly, but only to pre-marked locations. I can place a mark at the secondary site and retrieve us after delivery, but the window will be narrow. I'm going too, Tenten said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Weapon delivery and retrieval is my specialty. And someone needs to watch his back while he's doing the math. She didn't look at Peter, but her stance was definitive. Naruto looked at Shikamaru, who gave a slow, troubled nod. It's the only viable strategy. High risk, catastrophic failure modes. But the alternative is guaranteed, widespread annihilation. I'll oversee the evacuation of both perimeters and prepare contingency barriers. Naruto stepped forward, placing a hand on Peter's shoulder. The grip was firm, warm, alive. You built the cure. Now you have to make the shot. We'll hold the line here, make sure your exit is clear. His blue eyes held Peter's. No quipping. Just get it done. For the first time, Peter didn't feel the urge to make a joke. The void where his spider sense had been was filled with the colossal weight of what they were about to attempt. Yes, sir. Preparation Bay, 7:02 p.m. The final hour was a blur of frantic, precise activity. In a sealed subchamber, Peter worked on the resonant core, a basketball-sized orb of the silvery orichalcum, its surface etched with the complete, microscopic fractal of the seal of shattered song, now powered by a central vial of his concentrated web fluid. It glowed with a soft, internal light, humming a note so pure it made the air vibrate. Tenten worked beside him, preparing a delivery system. It wasn't a weapon scroll, the core's energy would disrupt any standard sealing matrix. Instead, she adapted a launch tube from a portable signal flare launcher, reinforcing it with chakra-conductive bands and lining it with a cushion of spider silk Peter had produced in a sterile tank. It needs to survive impact with the Tears event horizon, she muttered, her fingers deftly weaving the final silk buffer. A hard impact could trigger it early. Aim for the center, a soft, parabolic lob, Peter instructed, connecting the final wires from a small, handheld tuner, a modified version of his web shooter interface, to a port on the core. The tuner will give me a live readout of the Tears frequency. I have to match it and hit arm the millisecond before it enters. You'll have the launcher. She nodded, her focus absolute. There was no room for the awkwardness from before, only the seamless integration of their skills. As she finished, her hand brushed his. This time, there was no static shock, just a moment of solid, warm contact. They both paused, looked at each other in the glow of the humming core. "Don't do anything stupid out there," she said quietly. "It's kind of my thing," he replied, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Then I'll do the smart things. Like shooting the monster if it looks at you." Sasuke entered, holding 2 communication earpieces. "The mark is placed. I have visual on the secondary site from a high ridge. The entity is forming. It's not a creature. It's more like a geometric storm. A vortex of crystallizing force. We go in 5 minutes." Peter took a deep breath. The core was ready. The launcher was ready. He was not. He felt naked without the tingling warning, a soldier going into a minefield blindfolded. He picked up the core. It was warm, and the hum traveled up his arm, a song of salvation and destruction. They moved to the main chamber. Naruto and a full squad of ANBU were there, forming a protective circle around the resonator's dais. The Hokage gave them one last, fierce nod. "Ready?" Sasuke asked, placing a hand on Peter's shoulder and another on Tenten's. Peter clutched the core to his chest with one arm, the tuner in his other hand. Tenten hefted the launch tube. "Ready," they said together. Space twisted. The familiar chamber vanished in a dizzying swirl of unnatural color and pressure. It was the sensation of being squeezed through a straw, a sickening lurch that ended as abruptly as it began. The mountain's graveyard, 7:08 p.m. They appeared on a windswept ledge of black, volcanic rock. The smell was immediate and overwhelming, sulfur, ozone, and a pervasive, chalky dust that coated the tongue. The landscape was a jagged nightmare of skeletal rock formations under a bruised, twilight sky. And before them, 200 yards down in a massive crater, was the secondary tier. It was a wound. 3 times the size of the first, it churned like a vertical maelstrom of shattered mirrors and black lightning. The sound was a physical pressure, a deep, droning thrum that shook the rocks beneath their feet. Around its base, the ground was not gray, but a glistening, obsidian glass. And before it, coalescing from strands of violent violet energy, was the surgeon. It was as Sasuke described, less a being, more an event. A towering, shifting column of interlocking geometric plates, squares, triangles, dodecahedrons, all formed of the same dark crystal, spinning and grinding against each other with a sound like continents colliding. At its shifting apex, a single, baleful point of white light focused like an eye, scanning the corrupted landscape. It was methodical, purposeful, and utterly devoid of anything resembling life. It was a tool of celestial dissection. Peter's breath caught. The tuner in his hand went wild, its screen flooding with chaotic data. The frequency, it's chaotic. I can't get a lock. It's because of that thing. Tenten yelled over the din, already loading the core into the launch tube. It's disrupting the tier's native resonance. The surgeon's white eye swept across the landscape. It paused. It focused on their ledge. On the tiny, glowing core in Peter's hands. A soundless command seemed to pass through it. From the crater floor, a dozen of the smaller, stone-skinned cleaner entities unfolded from the glass and began scaling the cliff face with terrifying speed, their purpose clear: eliminate the foreign object. "We're out of time," Sasuke said, his Sharingan and Rinnegan both active. "I'll clear the path. You get to the edge. You have 30 seconds. In a flash of purple Chidori, he was gone, appearing amidst the climbing creatures like a reaper, his sword a blur of annihilation. "Come on." Tenten grabbed Peter's arm, pulling him along the ledge towards a precarious outcropping that offered a clearer shot at the tear below. Rocks skittered under their feet, plummeting into the droning abyss. They reached the point. The surgeon, ignoring Sasuke's diversion, was now turning its full, terrible attention towards them. The geometric plates along its side began to realign, focusing into what looked like a massive, crystalline cannon barrel aimed directly at their position. Peter stared at the tuner, his mind screaming. The reading was a mess of interference. He couldn't find the pure note of the tear. Without it, the core was just a fancy paperweight. Or a dud. He looked at the approaching surgeon. At the swirling tear. At Tenten, who had the launch tube braced against her shoulder, her gaze fixed on the target, waiting for his signal. A memory flashed. Not of science. Of music. Of sitting on the fire escape with Uncle Ben, listening to the old man's jazz records. "Listen, Pete," Ben had said, tapping his temple. "Sometimes you don't hear the melody in the noise. You feel it in here. You find the silence between the beats." The silence between the beats. Peter closed his eyes. He blocked out the droning tear, the grinding of the surgeon, the sounds of Sasuke's battle. He stopped listening with his ears, with the tuner. He tried to feel it. To find the silent, screaming frequency he had lived with for a week, the frequency of the infection that had been in him. He reached into the void where his spider sense had been. Not for a warning, but for an echo. The ghost of the song that had nearly turned him to stone. And there, in the absolute quiet of his loss, he felt a faint, sympathetic vibration. A memory of cold. A perfect, silent note. His eyes snapped open. His hands flew over the tuner, not reading the screen, but inputting values from a ghost memory. The core in the launch tube began to glow brighter, its hum shifting, sharpening, cutting through the chaotic noise. "I have it," he shouted. "Now, Tenten. Now." Tenten didn't hesitate. She exhaled, her finger tightening on the trigger. "For Konoha," she whispered. Thwump. The launch tube discharged with a soft, pneumatic sigh. The resonant core, glowing like a captured star, arced out over the crater in a perfect, slow-motion parabola, spinning gently, trailing strands of harmonic light. The surgeon's cannon fired. A beam of silent, annihilating white energy lanced towards the flying core, intending to vaporize it. Sasuke teleported into the path of the beam, Susanu's skeletal ribcage flaring to life around him for a split second. The impact was colossal, shattering the Susanu and blasting him backwards into the rock face, but it deflected the beam by a critical degree. It seared past the core, missing by inches. Peter's thumb hovered over the arm button on his tuner. He watched the core's flight, felt the ghost frequency in his soul, saw the tear, chaotic swirl. Now. He pressed the button. The core's light didn't explode. It unfolded. The fractal seal on its surface activated, emitting a sphere of silent, shimmering vibration just as it passed the event horizon of the secondary tier. For a moment, nothing. Then, the world sang. The droning thrum of the tear turned into a rising, crystalline chime that climbed up through every conceivable frequency. The swirling vortex of shattered mirrors froze, then began to vibrate apart. The surgeon, caught in the expanding harmonic wave, let out a silent scream of shattering geometry. Its interlocking plates flew apart, not in an explosion, but in a silent, graceful disintegration into clouds of iridescent dust. The tear itself pulsed once, a final, blinding flash of white light, and then collapsed inward with a sound like a universe sighing in relief. Gone. Leaving only a smooth, scarred circle of obsidian glass in the crater floor. Silence. True, profound silence, fell over the mountain's graveyard. The wind stilled. The dust settled. On the ledge, Peter's legs gave out. He slumped to his knees, the tuner falling from numb fingers. Tenten dropped the launch tube, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She stumbled over to him, grabbing his shoulder. Did we? Peter could only nod, his eyes fixed on the empty space where the end of the world had been. A moment later, Sasuke appeared beside them, leaning heavily on his sword, his left arm hanging at an odd angle. He looked at the scarred crater, then at Peter. The package was delivered. The secondary sight is neutralized. A faint, almost imperceptible nod of respect. The surgery was successful. They had done it. They had thrown a song into the heart of a storm and shattered it. But as Peter looked at the communications earpiece lying on the rock, a frantic, distorted voice was suddenly screaming through it. It was Shikamaru. Imeri sight. The entity, IT, was a decoy. The real surgeon is manifesting at the primary site. It's here. It's at the resonator. Naruto is engaging alone. Get back now. The victory turned to ash in Peter's mouth. They had been played. The real horror wasn't in the graveyard. It was back home. And it was already in the operating room. Chapter 9, The Heart of the Storm. Primary site, the web, 7:12 p.m. The tranquil evening over Konoha's forest was a lie. Within the 5-mile evacuated perimeter around the Nakano River, reality was screaming. The real surgeon had not been in the mountain's graveyard. That had been a probe, a sophisticated, sacrificial feint designed to draw out their best weapon and their brightest mind. The moment the harmonic bomb detonated 50 miles away, sending its stabilizing shockwave through the dimensional substrata, the primary tier at the resonator site convulsed. It wasn't a collapse. It was a violent, predatory dilation. The patched webbing, strained by Peter's earlier pulse, vaporized instantly. The tier ripped open, widening to 3 times its original size, becoming a roaring, vertical vortex of anti-light that sucked the color and sound from the world. From its heart, the true surgeon emerged. It made the decoy look like a child's toy. This entity was not a column, but a perfect, hovering sphere of interlocking, obsidian polyhedrons, each face the size of a house, rotating in impossible, silent synchrony. It emitted no sound, but its presence imposed a crushing psychic pressure, a feeling of profound, terminal correction. Where it hovered, the grass didn't just die, it unwrote itself, leaving behind smooth, featureless dirt as if it had never existed. The air around it was a freezing vacuum. Naruto Uzumaki stood between it and the humming, vulnerable resonator. He was already in sage mode, the orange pigment around his eyes stark against his grim expression. Dozens of shadow clones poofed into existence, forming a layered defensive wall. The Hokage's cloak was gone, discarded for freedom of movement. "You're not cleaning anything here," Naruto growled, his voice amplified by natural energy. "This is our home." The surgeon's surface shifted. A single polyhedron on its lower hemisphere irised open, revealing not a cannon, but a perfectly smooth, black funnel. It pointed not at Naruto, but past him, at the resonator's central core. It was ignoring him. He was not a threat, he was an obstacle. A beam of absolute nullification lanced out. It wasn't energy. It was the absence of energy, of concept, of form. It didn't destroy, it deleted. Sage art, massive Rasengan. Naruto and 10 clones launched the colossal spiraling spheres of chakra to intercept the beam. The contact was silent and horrifying. The Rasengans didn't explode. They unraveled, their complex chakra patterns dissolving into harmless light before being sucked into the beam's null field. The beam continued, undiminished. Naruto's eyes widened. He threw himself bodily in its path. Truth-seeking orbs. The black, gravity-defying spheres of 6 paths chakra materialized and formed a barrier. The null beam struck them. For a second, they held, reality itself warping around the clash of opposing cosmic principles. Then, with a sound like glass cracking in a vacuum, one of the truth-seeking orbs flickered and vanished. The beam punched through, searing past Naruto's shoulder and striking the outer shielding of the resonator. The effect was instantaneous. A 10-foot section of the beautifully crafted copper-steel helix didn't melt or shatter. It simply ceased to be. It left a perfectly clean, geometric gap, as if it had never been assembled. The resonator's hum stuttered, a pained, discordant whine. The surgeon drifted forward, methodical, inevitable. Another polyhedron began to iris open. Naruto felt a cold dread that had nothing to do with the entity's temperature. He couldn't stop the beams. He could only delay them. And the resonator couldn't take many hits. "Shikamaru," he yelled into his comms. "I need a distraction. Anything." From the tree line, a coordinated barrage of explosive tags, Foma shuriken, and high-pressure water jets slammed into the surgeon's flank. They were attacks that could level a fortress. They impacted the rotating polyhedrons and vanished without a trace, absorbed into the same null field. The entity didn't even acknowledge them. Its entire focus was on the resonator, the source of the irritating, stabilizing frequency it had been sent to excise. Naruto charged. Not with a jutsu, but with pure, close-quarters taijutsu enhanced by every ounce of Sage and Ninetales chakra he could muster. He became a golden blur, striking the entity's surface with earth-shattering force. Each blow landed with a dull thud that vibrated up his bones. The polyhedron he struck didn't crack. It absorbed the kinetic energy, its surface shimmering for a nanosecond before returning to perfect, cold obsidian. A reciprocal, concussive pulse of force erupted from the point of impact, throwing Naruto back through the air. He skidded across the ground, carving a trench in the dirt. He pushed himself up, spitting out blood and dirt. His knuckles were split and bleeding. He was having no effect. None. The second null beam fired. Naruto, still off balance, could only watch in horror as it speared towards the resonator's central control dais, towards the console Peter had built. A wall of purple chakra, rippling with skeletal form, materialized in front of the beam. Sasuke's Susanoo, battered and missing an arm from the graveyard, had teleported directly into the line of fire. The null beam struck the Susanoo's ribcage. The purple energy hissed and evaporated like dry ice. The beam continued, diminished but still lethal, and punched through the Susanoo's core, dissipating it completely. Sasuke was thrown clear, crashing into the base of the resonator structure, unconscious or worse. But the beam had been weakened. It hit the console, not deleting it entirely, but shearing off a critical bank of controls in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The resonator's hum died completely. The great machine went dark, its stabilizing field collapsing. The surgeon paused. Its surface scanned the now silent device. Its objective, neutralize the anomalous frequency, was seemingly achieved. Then, with a terrifying, logical pivot, its central eye, a confluence of a dozen polyhedral vertices, swiveled and locked onto Naruto. The obstacle remained. And the obstacle was saturated with the foreign energy it was tasked with purging. The surgeon's programming recalibrated. Eradicate the source. The entire sphere seemed to contract, then pulse. A wave of silent, expanding nullification emanated from it, not a beam but a bubble. It began to swell, consuming the ground, the air, the light, moving outward at a walking pace. A perfect sphere of erasure, with the surgeon at its center, and Naruto, Sasuke, and the broken resonator within its bounds. This was the purge cascade. It would delete a half-mile sphere of reality, scrubbing it clean of the infection that was chakra, life, and memory. Naruto stared at the advancing wall of nothingness. He could feel the nine tails churning in panic within him. He could run. He could probably outpace the wave. But Sasuke was down. The resonator, their only hope of a permanent cure, was crippled. Konoha was beyond the perimeter, but this would leave a wound in the world that might never heal. He sank into a stance, his hands coming together. If he couldn't stop it, he'd have to contain it. He'd have to push back. He began gathering every scrap of chakra, his own, the nine tails, the lingering natural energy of the forest. A Rasengan began to form between his palms, but not a normal one. He poured everything into it, the energy compressing, spiraling, growing denser and brighter than it ever had before. It wasn't a Rasen shuriken, it was something raw, primal, a vortex of pure creation and will meant to oppose the wave of uncreation. The golden light blazed from him, a small sun against the advancing tide of black. The wind whipped around him, pulled towards the churning sphere in his hands. "You will not have my home," he roared, his voice cracking with strain. He thrust his hands forward, unleashing the cataclysmic spiral of chakra directly into the heart of the expanding null field. The collision had no sound. It had a sensation, the universe flinching. The golden spiral met the black sphere and for a moment, held. A terrifying boundary formed, a shimmering, chaotic event horizon where color and void fought for supremacy. Naruto poured everything into it, his body trembling, veins standing out on his forehead and neck. He was holding back the end of the world with sheer, stubborn force of will. But he was one man. The surgeon was a cosmic constant. The null field bubble continued to expand, slowly, inexorably, bending the golden light backwards, swallowing it. Naruto was pushed back, his feet plowing twin furrows in the dirt. The wave was now only 30 feet away. 20. He could see his reflection in the advancing wall of nothing, a desperate, glowing figure being slowly erased from the universe. He thought of Hinata. Of Boruto and Himawari. Of Konoha. Of the idiot, brave kid from another world who had given everything to help. "I'm sorry," he thought. "I couldn't." Then, a voice, filtered through static and desperation, shrieked in his earpiece. "Naruto. Don't you dare give up." It was Peter. The resonator. It's not dead. The core is gone but the frame is still tuned. It's a giant tuning fork. You need to ring it. Naruto, his vision swimming with effort, looked past the advancing doom at the dark, silent helix of the resonator. Ring it? With what? A massive chakra pulse. Peter's voice was frantic, the sound of wind and movement behind him. Not an attack. A pure pulse. Like striking a bell. It has to be at the resonant frequency. Sasuke's data, the original frequency of the tear, it's in the console's memory. You have to access it and then hit the structure with that exact frequency. The console was half destroyed. Sasuke was down. The data was gone. But Naruto remembered. He remembered Peter explaining it, drawing the sine wave on the whiteboard. He remembered Sasuke's monotone recitation of the numbers. Sigma, 7. A feeling. A song. He couldn't access the data. He had to be the data. With a final, guttural scream, Naruto didn't push against the null field. He pulled. He yanked back his colossal Rasengan, absorbing a portion of its chaotic energy back into himself. Then, he turned his back on the surgeon. He ran. Not away, but towards the resonator. The null field surged forward, inches from his heels. He reached the base of the metal structure. He placed one hand, blazing with golden chakra, against the cold orichalcum of the main support strut. He closed his eyes. He didn't think of jutsu formulas. He thought of the forest's hum. Of the village's laughter. Of the quiet trust in Peter's eyes. Of the stubborn, unkillable beat of life. He found the frequency not in numbers, but in memory. In the heart of everything he protected. He poured that feeling, that pure, fundamental note of Konoha, into the metal. Doom. The resonator didn't just activate. It sang. A single, pure, planet-deep tone erupted from it. A visible wave of solidified sound, shimmering like a heat haze, radiated outwards in a perfect sphere. It passed through Naruto, a vibration that felt like coming home. It passed through the unconscious Sasuke. It met the expanding null field. This time, the reaction was not a struggle. It was an annulment. The pure, stable frequency of the resonator was the antithesis of the surgeon's null wave. Where they met, the null field didn't push back, it shattered. It fragmented into a million dissolving pieces of static that evaporated like black snow in sunlight. The wave receded, crumbling back towards its source. The surgeon's perfect sphere shuddered. The synchrony of its rotating plates broke. They ground against each other, out of phase. The pure tone of the resonator was inside it now, vibrating in the spaces between its polyhedral bones. With a final, silent tremor, the surgeon came apart. Not in an explosion, but in a graceful, tragic dissolution. Its obsidian plates drifted away from each other, losing cohesion, fading from solid to transparent to nothing, leaving only a faint, shimmering dust in the air that was carried away by the returning wind. The resonator's tone faded, leaving a ringing silence that was the sweetest sound Naruto had ever heard. He slumped against the strut, utterly spent, his chakra reserves scraped hollow. The primary tier, its sustaining entity gone and bathed in the stabilizing frequency, gave one last, weak flicker and pinched out of existence with a soft pop. The convergence was over. Panting, bleeding, Naruto looked up as three figures landed clumsily in the clearing, Peter, supported by a limping Ten-Ten, with Sasuke's unconscious form slung over Peter's shoulders in a fireman's carry. Peter's face was pale with exhaustion and terror, his eyes wide as he took in the scorched, half-deleted clearing, the broken resonator, and the fading motes of the surgeon. He met Naruto's eyes. Naruto, with the last of his strength, gave him a thumbs up and a wobbly, triumphant grin. Peter let out a shaky breath that was half a laugh, half a sob, and gently lowered Sasuke to the ground. The horror was past. The surgeons had been dismissed. The world, for now, was saved. Chapter 10, The Quiet Dawn. Konoha General Hospital, Recovery Wing, 9 a.m., 2 days later. Sunlight, clean and ordinary, streamed through the window of the private recovery room. It smelled of antiseptic, fresh linen, and the faint, comforting aroma of medicinal herbs steeping in a pot on a warmer. The silence was no longer oppressive, but peaceful, the deep, earned quiet after a long storm. Peter Parker lay propped up on a mountain of pillows, his body a tapestry of fading bruises and healing cuts. The profound cold was gone, replaced by a normal, human warmth and a bone-deep weariness that felt like a privilege. He was wearing soft, cotton Konoha sleep clothes, his own suit folded neatly on a chair, torn and stained but preserved. The door slid open with a whisper. Ten-Ten entered, carrying a tray. She, too, bore the marks of their ordeal, a bandage on her temple, a slight stiffness in her gait, but she moved with her usual efficient grace. On the tray was a bowl of steaming broth that smelled of chicken and ginger, and a plate of soft rice cakes. Hospital food, she said, setting the tray on his bedside table. But it beats ration bars in a crumbling dimension. Peter managed a weak smile. Anything beats that. His voice was still a little rough. He watched her as she arranged the tray. There was an easy silence between them now, forged in the fire of shared terror and triumph. "How's everyone?" Sasuke regained consciousness this morning, she reported, sitting in the chair beside his bed. Broken ribs, severe chakra exhaustion, and a lecture from Sakura about using the Susanoo as a speed bump. "He'll be fine." Naruto, she shook her head, a fond, exasperated look on her face. "He was discharged last night against medical advice. Said he had Hokage paperwork to do. He's probably at Ichiraku's, eating enough ramen to feed a small country." Peter's smile widened. That sounded exactly right. And the sights? Sealed. Completely. The resonator's final pulse did more than shatter the surgeon, it harmonically healed the dimensional weak points. Shikamaru's sensors show the fabric is stable. No residual energy. It's over. The words "it's over" hung in the sunlit air. They should have felt like a victory march. They mostly felt like the first moment he could truly breathe since falling through a hole in a bank vault. He looked down at his hands, resting on the blanket. They were just hands. No tingling. No early warning system. He flexed his fingers, feeling the pull of healing muscles, the throb of a scabbed over cut. It was all normal. Terribly, wonderfully normal. Tenten followed his gaze. Does it feel strange? She asked softly. The quiet? He nodded, not trusting his voice for a second. It's like losing a sense. You keep reaching for a light switch in a room you know is dark. He looked at her. I used to know, seconds before it happened, if someone was about to throw a punch, or if a bullet was coming. Now. I'm just a guy in a bed who can't even sit up without getting dizzy. You're the guy, Tenten corrected, her tone firm, who built a machine that sang a monster to death. Who figured out the frequency in his heart when the machines were broken. Who carried an Uchiha on his back across 50 miles. She leaned forward slightly. The power didn't make you a hero, Peter. It just gave you fancy tools. The hero was already in there. He still is. Her words were a bomb, simple and direct. They didn't erase the loss, but they reframed it. He wasn't less. He was different. Thanks, Tenten, he said, his voice thick. Don't mention it. She stood up, businesslike again. Now eat your broth before it gets cold. The medic Neen said your metabolism is still hyperactive. You need the fuel. As he ate, she stayed, telling him about the village's reaction, the controlled relief, the stories already circulating about the fallen star hero and the Hokage's stand. It was mundane, gossipy, human. It was everything he'd fought for. Later that afternoon, his next visitor arrived with significantly less grace. The door slammed open. Believe it. Naruto strode in, looking remarkably energetic for a man who'd nearly been erased from reality. He carried a large, fragrant paper bag. I brought the good stuff. Ichiraku's special recovery ramen. Extra chashu. He plopped the bag down, then looked Peter over with a critical eye. You look better. Less gray. Feel better, Peter said. Mostly hungry. Good. That's the Uzumaki way. Naruto pulled up the chair, his expression turning more serious. Shikamaru's got the final reports. The dimensional walls are solid. No sign of any more cleaners. Whatever you did, it worked. Permanently. We did, Peter corrected. Naruto waved a hand, but his eyes were earnest. You showed us a new way to fight. Not just with bigger bombs, but with smarter ones. With music. He grinned. Old man Tucci at the ramen shop wants to put a spider ramen on the menu in your honor. I told him you'd probably want a web of noodles or something. Peter laughed, a real, full laugh that hurt his ribs but felt incredible. The absurdity was perfect. Naruto's grin softened. We tried. With what we learned from the resonator, from the seal of shattered song. We thought maybe we could. I don't know, build you a new sense. A chakra-based one. Peter's breath caught. Hope, sharp and painful, flared for a second. Naruto saw it and shook his head, his expression apologetic. It didn't work. Tsunade, Sakura, Shikamaru, we pored over it. The thing that was severed, it wasn't just a nerve. It was a connection to a dimension of information your body had learned to tap into. We can't rewire that. I'm sorry. The hope died, but it was a clean death. He'd already begun to mourn. This was just the funeral. It's okay, Peter said, and he found he meant it. I'm getting used to the quiet. Naruto studied him, then nodded, satisfied. Good. Because you've got a different kind of work to do now. He pulled a small, flat device from his pocket, a sleek, black tablet with Konoha's leaf symbol on the back. It was clearly advanced, a blend of local craftsmanship and principles Peter had sketched during his fevered work. We're not sending you home empty-handed. Or, well, we are sending you home. That's the point. Peter stared. Home? You found a way? The resonator gave us the blueprint, Naruto said, activating the tablet. A complex, rotating model of a dimensional gate appeared. Not a tier. A door. A stable, two-way portal, anchored by harmonically paired resonators, one there, one here. We can build the framework here, based on your designs. But we need someone on the other side to build its twin. To anchor it in your New York. The implications exploded in Peter's mind. A bridge. Not a wound, but a connection. Controlled. Safe. You're giving me the keys, he breathed. We're giving you a responsibility, Naruto corrected, his Hokage voice in full effect. You'll be the ambassador. The gatekeeper. This isn't for tourism. It's for knowledge. For help. If your world has a problem like this again, or ours does, we call for help. We share science. We share ramen recipes. He grinned again. But it only works if you build the other side. And you have to decide who, in your world, you trust enough to help you do it. Who you trust with our world. The weight of it was immense. Tony Stark would have loved this. But Tony was gone. There was Doctor Strange, but that came with a whole sanctum of baggage. There was Reed Richards, who was brilliant but famously Reed. And there was the simple, terrifying truth, he trusted the people in this room, in this village, more than almost anyone back home. I'll do it, Peter said without hesitation. I'll build it. And I know who to ask. They're good people. I know they are, Naruto said simply. You chose them. He handed Peter the tablet. The schematics are here. The theory. The chemical compositions for the conductive polymers, your web fluid base is key. It's the only substance we know that's native to both sides of the resonance. You'll need to make a lot of it. Peter took the tablet. It felt like holding a future. Thank you. No, Naruto said, standing and placing a hand on his shoulder. Thank you, Peter Parker. For being a good neighbor. 3 days later, the cleansed glade. The site of the primary tier was now just a peaceful forest clearing again. The resonator had been carefully dismantled, its components archived for study. All that remained was a simple stone marker, engraved with Konoha's leaf and a stylized spider web. The entire senior leadership of Konoha stood in a semicircle. Peter, dressed in his repaired suit, the tiers neatly stitched by a thoughtful 1010, stood before them, the interdimensional tablet secured in a padded pouch on his hip. He felt stronger, steadier. The quiet inside was still there, but it was becoming his new baseline, a canvas for his thoughts rather than an empty void. Sakura had cleared him. Tsunade had gruffly pronounced him harder to kill than a cockroach. Shikamaru had given him a brutally complex dossier on potential interdimensional diplomatic protocols, just in case, troublesome as it is. Sasuke, still pale but upright, gave a single, curt nod. Do not lose the tablet. I'll guard it with my life, Peter promised. Tenten stepped forward. She wasn't in her Jonin vest, but in a simple, dark blue tunic. In her hands, she held a long, narrow package wrapped in dark cloth. A going-away present, she said, her voice unusually formal. From my personal collection. He unwrapped it. It was a sword. Not a katana, but a sleek, straight-bladed jian of the finest folded steel, its guard intricately engraved with a web pattern that mirrored his own. The balance was perfect. It's beautiful, he said, stunned. But I don't really know how to use a sword. I know, she said, a small, knowing smile on her lips. That's why it's not the gift. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small scroll, tied with a red cord. The gift is a lifetime of lessons. Open the scroll when you're ready. It'll summon a teacher. A training scroll. A connection. A promise of return. Peter felt a lump in his throat. He took the scroll, his fingers brushing hers. I'll study hard. Finally, Naruto stepped forward. He held no weapon, no scroll. He held out his fist. Ready? Peter bumped his fist against Naruto's. Ready. Naruto turned to a small, temporary structure that had been erected, a simple arch of the silvery orichalcum, humming gently. This was not the full gate, just a one-time, pinpoint portal, calibrated using the last of the harmonic data and a tiny, precious vial of Peter's original, pre-infection web fluid as a homing beacon. Harmonic recall, Pathfinder Jutsu. Naruto channeled a stream of pure, stable chakra into the arch. The space within the arch shimmered, not with chaotic colors, but with a clear, mirror-like surface. The image resolved not into a forest, but into a dim, cluttered space, a familiar, beloved clutter. The exposed brick wall of his and MJ's apartment. The drafting table covered in her sketches. The faint sound of distant New York traffic. Home. Peter took a deep breath, the air of Konoha filling his lungs one last time: pine, damp earth, hope. He turned and looked at them all, the Hokage who never gave up, the shadow who planned for everything, the last Uchiha, the medic who fought death itself, the weaponsmith who saw the hero within. "Thank you," he said, his voice clear and strong in the quiet glade. "For everything." He didn't say goodbye. With the tablet, with the sword, with the scroll, it wasn't a goodbye. He turned, and with a step that was both heavy and light, he walked through the arch. The mirror surface rippled, accepting him. For a second, he was between, feeling the gentle, tuned hum of the bridge, a song of connection, not convergence. Then his foot landed on a scuffed wooden floor. The smell of old coffee, turpentine, and home washed over him. The portal behind him winked out with a soft chime, leaving only his apartment wall. He was back. He was just Peter Parker. But he was also something new. A man who had helped save a world not his own. A man who had lost a power and found himself. A man with a sword he couldn't use, a scroll of promise, and the schematics to build a bridge between realities in his pocket. He heard a key in the lock. The door opened. MJ stood there, frozen, a bag of groceries slipping from her hand. Her eyes, wide with shock, fear, and dawning, impossible hope, locked on his. "Peter," she whispered, his name a prayer. He smiled, a tired, real, full smile. "Hey, MJ. You would not believe the week I've had." The adventure in one world was over. But the story of Peter Parker, the hero between worlds, was just beginning. And for the first time in a long time, he faced the future not with a tingling sense of dread, but with a quiet, steady heart, and the warm, echoing memory of a song that had saved everything. Chapter 11, Home is a Strange Tune. Peter and MJ's apartment, Queens, New York, moments later. The world snapped into focus with a sensory overload that was almost violent. The silence of Konoha's glade was obliterated by the distant, rhythmic throb of garbage trucks, the wail of a car alarm 3 blocks over, the tinny bass line of someone else's music vibrating through the floorboards. The air was thick, not with pine and ozone, but with the familiar, comforting sickening cocktail of exhaust fumes, old brick dust, simmering garlic from the Italian place downstairs, and the faint, ever-present tang of the East River. MJ dropped the grocery bag. A lemon rolled across the floor, coming to rest against Peter's boot. She didn't move. Her face, usually a masterpiece of composed skepticism, was a canvas of shock so profound it had wiped all expression clean. Her eyes, wide and green, scanned him, the repaired but battle-stained suit, the new, weary lines around his eyes, the strange, straight sword in its cloth wrapping under his arm, the sleek, unfamiliar tablet at his hip. They lingered on his face, searching for a trick, a hologram, a cruel dream. Peter. The name was a fragile thing on her lips. "Hey, MJ," he said again, his voice rough with disuse and emotion. He tried for his usual smile, the one that was half apology, half charm. It felt strange on his face, like a costume that didn't quite fit anymore. The spell broke. She crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, her hands flying up, not to hug him, but to hover over his shoulders, his chest, as if afraid he'd dissolve. "You're here. You're real." They said. There was an energy signature, a breach at the bank, then nothing. For over a week. Fury had people crawling over the vault. Strange did, whatever it is he does. They found traces of your web fluid mixed with something that made his sling ring spark. Her words tumbled out in a frantic, relieved torrent. "We thought you were disintegrated. Or in another dimension. Which, I guess, you were." Her hands finally landed on his shoulders, gripping tight, confirming his solidity. "Another dimension, Peter. What the hell?" He let out a breath he felt he'd been holding since the mountain's graveyard. The sheer, normalcy of her anger-terror relief was a grounding wire. "It's a long story. With ninjas." She blinked. Once. Twice. Ninjas. And a giant, geometric, reality-eating snowflake. And a hole in the world. And I helped build a giant tuning fork to sing it to death. He shrugged, the motion pulling at healing muscles. "You know. Standard Tuesday." A laugh burst from her, sharp and startled, dissolving the last of the tension. She pulled him into a fierce, breath-stealing hug. He hugged her back, burying his face in her hair, inhaling the scent of her shampoo, pearlescent mint, and the charcoal from the sketching she'd been doing to keep from losing her mind. It was the most real thing he'd felt in weeks. When they finally pulled apart, her artist's eyes were already cataloging the changes. "You're different," she stated, no question in her tone. "Yeah," he admitted. "I lost something over there. Something important." He tapped his temple. The tingle. The spider sense. It's gone. Burned out saving their world. Her face fell, understanding the magnitude of that loss immediately. Oh, Peter. But I gained perspective, he said quickly, not wanting her pity. And a job. He held up the tablet. I need to see Strange. And I need a lab. A big, private, very secure lab. And, maybe a diplomatic introduction to Nick Fury. Sanctum Sanctorum, Greenwich Village, 4 hours later. The air in the sanctum was, as always, a layer cake of smells, old parchment, candle wax, incense, and the faint, cold scent of other dimensions leaking under the doors. Dr. Stephen Strange, cloak of levitation billowing slightly, stood before the large window, his back to the room. Wong was by the fireplace, calmly sipping tea, his expression unreadable. Peter, now in street clothes, jeans, a science pun t-shirt that felt absurdly lightweight, stood with MJ. He'd laid it all out. The tear, Konoha, the nature of chakra, the convergence as a sympathetic resonance between traumatized universes, the surgeon, the resonator, the sacrifice of his sense. Strange finally turned. His face was a mask of intense concentration. A harmonic solution to a dimensional malignancy. Using the invasive energy itself as the carrier for the cure. It's elegantly arrogant. And it should not have worked. But it did, Peter said. Because their chakra and whatever energy my spider bite granted aren't just power sources. They're information. They're reflections of their home dimensions. The resonator didn't just blast energy, it communicated. It sent a message of stability that the invasive pattern couldn't coexist with. Strange's eyes narrowed. And they gave you the schematics for a bridge. A permanent, two-way bridge. His tone made it clear this was the most terrifying part of the story. A controlled bridge, Peter insisted, activating the tablet and projecting the schematics. They hovered in the air, a beautiful, complex fusion of Fuinjutsu seals and quantum mechanical principles. Anchored by paired resonators. It's not a tier. It's a door. With locks on both sides. They're trusting us, trusting me, to build the other half. To be the gatekeeper on this side. Wong set his tea down with a definitive clink. You are proposing we establish a formal diplomatic and technological exchange with a hidden, militarized society of superhuman individuals from a universe with a fundamentally different physics model. Yes, Peter said simply. The potential for catastrophe is infinite, Strange stated. So is the potential for good, Peter shot back. Their medical ninjutsu could revolutionize biology. Their understanding of life energy could help us understand mutants, inhumans, enhanced individuals on a fundamental level. And we have things they don't, advanced material science, global digital networks, theoretical physics they've never conceived of. And more than that, he stepped forward, his voice dropping, we have a common enemy now. Not each other. Things like the surgeon. Things that see entire universes as infections. If another convergence happens, in their world or ours, we'll need each other. Silence stretched. Strange studied the schematics, his fingers tracing a complex seal form in the air. The anchor, it requires a substance native to both realities. You said it was based on your web fluid. The original formula, Peter confirmed. The one derived from the spider that bit me. That spider was altered by energies that are, I guess, a part of my universe's resonance. The fluid carries a faint signature of both sides. It's the only conductive material that can bridge the gap without causing a rupture. Strange and Wong shared a long, silent look. A whole conversation passed between them in raised eyebrows and slight head tilts. Finally, Strange sighed, a sound of supreme exasperation. Wong, clear out the sub-basement ritual chamber. Parker, you have your lab. Under the direct supervision of the Sorcerer Supreme. Every component, every step, will be monitored and warded to a degree that would give a celestial pause. He fixed Peter with a piercing gaze. You are the ambassador, Parker. This is your project. Your responsibility. If this goes wrong, the responsibility, and the consequences, are yours. Peter felt the weight settle onto his shoulders, familiar and terrifying. It was the same weight Naruto had carried. I understand. Good, Strange said. Now, about informing Fury. A secure shield safe house, somewhere over the Atlantic, 2 days later. The room was a sterile gray box. Nick Fury, in a black trench coat, stood before a holographic display showing the Konoha schematics, his single eye narrowed. Maria Hill stood beside him, her face impassive. Ninjas, Fury said, the word flat. You vanished for over a week and came back with a peace treaty from ninjas. And a sword. It's a jian, Peter corrected weakly, then cleared his throat. Director, their leader, the Hokage, he's not a threat. He's a protector. Like Cap was. Like, we try to be. This isn't an invasion. It's an offer of alliance. From a position of strength, I might add. They just fought off an existential threat we can barely comprehend. Fury paced. An alliance with a sovereign nation we can't sanction, can't map, and can't retaliate against if they break the rules. An alliance based on the word of one enhanced individual who has a noted history of chaotic altruism. He also has the schematics for interdimensional travel, Hill pointed out pragmatically. Schematics that, according to Strange, are not only functional but based on a science we don't understand. That's a strategic asset of incalculable value. Ignoring it is a greater risk than engaging. Fury stopped, turning his piercing gaze back to Peter. This door. Who controls it? We both do, Peter said. It needs both resonators to be active to open. They can't open it from their side without my say-so, and vice versa. I'm the key on this side. They've entrusted that to me. And if you die? Then the link is broken until a new key, trained and agreed upon by both sides, is made. It's in the protocols. Shikamaru, their strategist, thought of everything. It's all about mutual assured stability. Fury was silent for a full minute, absorbing it all. Finally, he grunted. All right. Provisional, covert engagement. SHIELD will provide secure materials, funding, and a perimeter around the sanctum for the construction phase. You are the sole point of contact. Every piece of data exchanged goes through me and a council consisting of myself, Hill, Strange, and, we'll need a scientist. Someone who can understand this fusion of mysticism and particle physics without having a religious experience or trying to weaponize it. Peter didn't hesitate. Reed Richards. Fury almost smiled. Of course. The one guy who might actually understand it and who's too busy with his own family to try and conquer the ninja dimension. He jabbed a finger at Peter. This stays quiet, Parker. World governments hear about this, they'll want to send probes, missionaries, and trade delegations. It'll be a circus. A dangerous, interdimensional circus. You built this bridge. You keep the traffic orderly. Yes, sir. The Sanctum Sanctorum sub-basement, 1 week later. The sub-basement had been transformed. It was now a breathtaking fusion of laboratories. One corner held Peter's chemistry set, beakers, condensers, and pressurized tanks where he was synthesizing industrial quantities of his web fluid base, the air smelling of volatile organics and ozone. Another corner was Reed Richards' domain, covered in holographic projections of multidimensional string theory equations that made even Strange pause. A third area was dedicated to Wong and Strange, who were inscribing colossal, glowing wards of containment and protection on the stone floors and walls, the air humming with latent power. In the center, under Stark-level industrial lights, the resonator frame was taking shape. It was not a copy of Konoha's, it was its twin, a mirror image. Instead of copper and chakra crystal, Reed had suggested a carbon nanotube and vibranium alloy for the primary structure, capable of handling insane energy loads. The central core, however, was pure Peter, a vat of his catalyzed web fluid, held in a magnetic suspension field, ready to be imprinted with the harmonic seal. Peter stood at a workbench, his hands steady as he used a microlaser to etch the final, microscopic lines of the primary seal onto a vibranium chip. He was surrounded by geniuses, by sorcerers, by spies. The ghost of Tony Stark seemed to hover approvingly. But he wasn't the genius in the room. He was the conductor. The translator. He was the one who could explain Shikamaru's seal logic to Reed, and Reed's quantum field adjustments to Strange. He was the link. MJ came down the stairs, carrying a pot of coffee. She surveyed the controlled chaos, her eyes finding Peter. She didn't say anything. Just poured him a cup and set it beside him, her hand resting on his back for a moment. He finished the etch, leaned back, and took a sip. The coffee was bitter and perfect. Reed Richards, his body stretching across the room to examine a sensor array, called over. Peter, the harmonic dampeners are showing a 0.03% phase variance. Should we adjust the crystal lattice frequency or the fluid's viscosity? Peter looked at the data, then at the original Konoha schematics on his tablet. He thought of the resonator singing in the glade. He didn't just see numbers, he heard the memory of the song. Adjust the lattice, he said with certainty. The fluid is the constant. The structure needs to sing in harmony with it. Reed nodded, making the adjustment without question. Peter looked at the growing structure, at the brilliant, unlikely team around him, at MJ's steady presence. The quiet inside him wasn't empty anymore. It was filling with a new kind of music, the sound of a future being built, note by careful note, between two worlds. He was home. And he was building a new one. Chapter 12, The First Note. Sanctum Sanctorum Sub-Basement, 3 weeks later. The air in the chamber no longer smelled of separate elements, chemicals, ozone, old magic. It had fused into a new scent, potential. It was the smell of charged air before a storm, of polished metal, and the faint, clean sweetness of the vast, viscous pool of catalyzed web fluid that shimmered in the central reactor vat. The Gateway Resonator, Earth 199,999's twin, was complete. It was a masterpiece of hybrid engineering. It stood like a sleek, futuristic obelisk, its skeleton of vibranium nanotube composite humming with a low-grade power feed from StarkTech arc reactors, borrowed and modified by Reed. Etched into its surface were the complex, interlaced patterns of the harmonic seal, glowing with a soft blue-white light, Strange and Wong's mystical wards woven directly into the physical structure. At its heart, visible through a transparent panel, the web fluid churned gently, acting as both power conductor and dimensional anchor. Peter stood before the main console, a hybrid interface of touchscreens and physical levers Reed had dubbed tactile failsafes. He was dressed in simple black pants and a t-shirt, the borrowed Konoha flak jacket hanging on a nearby chair. His hands were clean for the first time in weeks. The final systems check scrolled down the main screen, a waterfall of green OK indicators. The room's occupants were a council of the wary and the brilliant. Dr. Strange stood with his arms crossed, his cloak restless. Wong was by the door, holding a steaming mug of tea as if it were a sacred chalice. Reed Richards was a sprawl of limbs and intense focus at a secondary monitoring station. MJ leaned against a far wall, sketching in a pad, her presence a silent anchor. On a secure holographic feed, the grim faces of Nick Fury and Maria Hill watched from the SHIELD helicarrier. All systems report nominal, Reed said, his voice echoing slightly in the chamber. The harmonic matrix is stable. The web fluid anchor is reading a perfect sympathetic vibration with the theoretical model of the Konoha-side resonator. We are ready for initial synchronization. Strange stepped forward. The protective wards are at maximum. They will contain any energy backlash within this room. They will not, however, stop a hostile incursion if we've misinterpreted their intentions. His gaze was heavy on Peter. We haven't, Peter said, his voice calm. The quiet inside him was a deep well of certainty. He looked at the holographic faces. Director? Final authorization? Fury's single eye stared out of the feed. This is your show, Parker. You're the key. Turn it. Peter nodded. He took a deep breath, the scent of potential filling his lungs. His fingers danced across the console, entering the final activation sequence, a code that was half mathematical algorithm, half the memory of a specific chakra feeling Naruto had imprinted into the data crystal. Initiating harmonic handshake, he announced. Bringing primary systems online. Power to the resonator, 10%. He threw the main lever. A deep, resonant thrum filled the chamber, a physical vibration that traveled up from the floor through the soles of their feet. The blue-white etchings on the resonator flared brightly. In the central vat, the web fluid began to glow, shifting from pearlescent white to a soft, pulsating gold. Energy spike stable, Reed reported, his voice tight with excitement. Reading a coherent wave pattern. It's beautiful. It's pinging, Peter said, watching a dedicated screen. A single, repeating signal, like a sonar blip, was being emitted. It was the handshake, a simple, repeating tone containing their resonator's unique harmonic signature. For 30 seconds, nothing. The blip went out into the theoretical space between dimensions, seeking its twin. Then, the screen flickered. A new signal appeared, not a blip, but a sustained, answering tone. A perfect harmonic mirror. The two frequencies locked, creating a standing wave of interference that registered on the sensors as a solid, unwavering line. Connection established, Peter breathed. Synchronization confirmed. The space in front of the resonator began to shimmer. Not like the chaotic tear. This was a gentle, heat-haze distortion, resolving into a circular plane of light about 8 feet in diameter. It solidified into a clear, window-like portal. And through it, they saw not a forest, but a constructed room of polished wood and paper screens. Soft, natural light filtered in. The air that wafted through carried the scent of sandalwood, green tea, and sun-warmed tatami mats. Standing in the center of that room, flanked by Shikamaru and Sakura, was Naruto Uzumaki, the 7th Hokage. He wasn't in battle gear, but in formal Hokage robes, the red and white standing out vividly. He had a wide, relieved grin on his face. Behind him, just visible in the doorway, Peter could see the curious faces of what looked like Konoha's council. Naruto raised a hand in greeting. Took you long enough. Believe it. A wave of pure, disbelieving relief washed over Peter. It worked. It was real. It was stable. He found himself grinning back, the expression feeling more natural than it had in weeks. Had to make sure the wiring was up to code. You know how New York landlords are. Strange let out a slow, controlled breath next to him. The dimensional aperture is stable. No energy bleed. No hostile entities. It's a door. On the hologram, Fury's face was unreadable, but Maria Hill allowed herself a small, professional nod. Permission to come through? Naruto asked, his tone formal but eyes sparkling. Peter looked at Strange, who gave a curt nod. He looked at the Fury hologram. The director's voice crackled over the feed. Proceed. Keep it small. Permission granted, Peter said. Naruto stepped forward, and with a simple, casual stride, he walked out of the paper and wood room and onto the polished stone floor of the Sanctum Sanctorum sub-basement. The moment was historic, absurd, and profoundly human. The Hokage of a hidden village of superhuman ninja stood blinking under the stark industrial lights, taking in the sight of Reed Richards' stretched form, the floating cloak of levitation, and the severe faces of the Sorcerer Supreme. He sniffed the air. Huh. Smells like electricity, old books, and really strong coffee. His gaze landed on Peter and his grin returned, full force. He walked over and, to everyone's surprise, except Peter's, pulled him into a brief, back-thumping hug. You did it. You look better. Less New Yorkie. You look more Hokage. Why? Peter retorted, his voice slightly muffled. Naruto released him and turned to face the others, his demeanor shifting into one of calm authority. He bowed, a respectful dip of his head. I am Naruto Uzumaki, 7th Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village. On behalf of my people, I thank you for your trust and your extraordinary work. His eyes found Strange. You must be the keeper of this sanctum. We sense the powerful seals. Your skill is formidable. Strange, slightly taken aback by the directness and the respect, inclined his head. Dr. Stephen Strange, Sorcerer Supreme. The wards were necessary. Welcome to Earth. Reed Richards, Reed said, his arm elongating to offer a handshake, which Naruto took without flinching. Fascinating work on the harmonic theory. I have approximately 600 questions. Shikamaru will be happy to hear that, Naruto said with a laugh. He prepared a whole scroll of answers and counter-questions. He's waiting on the other side. He then looked at the Fury hologram. And you must be the leader of this world's military forces. Nick Fury. Director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury said. We'll skip the pleasantries. What are your immediate intentions? A cup of that coffee would be nice, Naruto said, his grin returning. Then he sobered. My intention is to honor the agreement. This gateway is a bridge for knowledge and aid, not for conquest or exploitation. I have brought initial gifts. He gestured, and Sakura, who had followed him through, stepped forward. She carried a simple wooden box. She opened it. Inside, on padded silk, lay several items, a few vials of a glowing green liquid, several intricately carved wooden tags, and a small, sealed scroll. Samples of our most potent regenerative serum, derived from chakra-aided cell manipulation, Sakura said, her voice professional. 3 explosive tags for your study, non-chakra users can activate them with a spark. And a scroll containing basic chakra theory and medical ninjutsu principles, translated by Shikamaru and myself into your scientific notation as best we could. Reed was practically vibrating. Strange looked intrigued. Fury looked suspicious. In return, Naruto continued, we would be grateful for any knowledge you can share about energy sources, material sciences, and disease theory. We have healers, but some illnesses still escape us. A fair exchange, Reed said immediately. We can provide a full library of medical journals, physics textbooks, engineering schematics. We'll vet everything before it goes through, Fury cut in. As you will, I assume. Of course, Naruto agreed easily. Shikamaru is a paranoid as, a very careful planner. Peter watched the exchange, his heart pounding with a quiet joy. It was working. The formal, cautious dance of diplomacy was beginning. He saw MJ sketching furiously, capturing the scene, the Hokage in his robes standing before the vibranium obelisk, the surreal meeting of 2 worlds. For the next hour, it continued. Naruto, with a surprising deftness, navigated the questions. He spoke of Konoha's history in broad strokes, of the will of fire, of their desire for peace. He asked insightful questions about global politics, about technology, about the enhanced. He was a natural diplomat, his earnestness disarming even Fury's ingrained cynicism. Finally, Naruto turned to Peter. Walk with me. They stepped away from the main group, towards the quieter corner where Peter's workbench stood, the Konoha flak jacket draped over it. Naruto's eyes fell on the cloth-wrapped Jien leaning against the wall. You've kept it. Tenten's gift, Peter said. I'm working up the courage to open the training scroll. It feels like a big commitment. Naruto chuckled. She's a serious teacher. It is a big commitment. He grew quiet, his gaze assessing Peter. The quiet, you're still living with it. Every day, Peter admitted. But it's getting easier. I'm learning to listen to different things. He nodded towards the murmuring diplomats. Like this. It's louder in a good way. Naruto nodded, satisfied. Good. I have something for you. Not from the village. From me. He pulled a small, flat stone from his pocket. It was smooth, with a single, spiral symbol carved into it. It's a communication stone. One of a pair. It doesn't need the gateway. If you ever need help, real help, world-ending help, or just advice, channel a little bit of any energy into it. Even a static shock. I'll feel it. And I'll come. Peter took the stone. It was warm, almost alive. It was a lifeline. A promise. Thank you, Naruto. Don't mention it. Naruto clapped him on the shoulder. Now, I should get back before Shikamaru sends a shadow to drag me through. We'll schedule the first formal data exchange in 72 hours. And Peter? His blue eyes were serious. You're not just the gatekeeper. You're the bridge. Don't let anyone forget that. With final nods to Strange, Reed, and a wary salute to Fury's hologram, Naruto turned and, with Sakura, walked back through the shimmering portal to his own world. The gateway remained open for a few more seconds, a window onto a sunlit room in another universe, then gently faded to a shimmer, and then to nothing, leaving only the humming resonator. The first contact was over. It had been peaceful. Productive. Silence descended, broken by Reed Richards letting out an exhilarated sigh. The data from those samples alone, this changes everything. Strange was already reinforcing the wards around the now-dormant gateway. The door is closed, but the path is open. We must be vigilant. On the hologram, Fury's face was grim. All right, Parker. You built it. You opened it. Now we see if we can keep it from blowing up in our faces. Hill, draft the first protocol package. Richards, you're on analysis. Strange, you're on defense. Parker, you're on call. The hologram winked out. Peter stood in the center of the room, the warm communication stone in one hand, the memory of Naruto's grin in his mind. He looked at the closed gateway, at the brilliant, worried people around him, at MJ putting away her sketchpad with a small, proud smile just for him. The bridge was built. The first note of a new, shared song had been played. The responsibility was crushing. The future was terrifying. And for the first time since the spider bit him, Peter Parker felt completely, utterly, and quietly at peace with his place in the multiverse. He was exactly where he was supposed to be, in the quiet space between the beats, helping two worlds learn to harmonize. Chapter 13, Echoes of the Void. The Sanctum Sanctorum, 3 months later. The sub-basement was no longer a sterile lab. It had become a lived-in crossroads. One wall was dominated by Reed Richards' holographic displays, now showing side-by-side analyses of chakra flow diagrams and quantum field equations. Another area was a makeshift library, with Konoha scrolls resting on stands next to tablets loaded with the entire history of Western medicine. The air held the permanent, layered scent of ozone, incense, old paper, and the ever-present, clean hum of the dormant gateway resonator. Peter's life had settled into a new, exhausting rhythm. By day, he was Peter Parker, freelance photographer and lab assistant to Reed Richards on the Cross-Dimensional Energy Project, a bland SHILD-approved cover. By night, he was the gatekeeper, studying Shikamaru's diplomatic missives, troubleshooting harmonic variances in the resonator with Reed, and, twice a week, under Tenten's stern but patient tutelage via pre-recorded instructional scrolls, learning the basics of Kenjutsu. His body ached in new, educational ways. The quiet in his mind was now a workspace. He filled it with formulae, sword stances, and the delicate phrasing of interworld correspondence. The exchange was flourishing. Konoha's regenerative serums, reverse-engineered with the help of Reed and a quietly fascinated Helen Cho, were leading to breakthroughs in trauma medicine. In return, Konoha's engineers, led by a shockingly enthusiastic Shikamaru, were experimenting with solar cell technology and basic computing logic, their first crude, chakra light bulb having lit up the Hokage's office to rave reviews. It was during one of these late-night study sessions, the city's nocturnal grumble a distant soundtrack, that the echo began. Peter was alone, practicing a basic Kirioroshi downward cut with the Jien, his muscles protesting. The resonator was in its lowest power, listening mode, a silent sentinel. As he finished the strike, holding the pose, a faint, almost subliminal vibration traveled up the blade from the tip, through the hilt, and into his bones. He froze. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling. A hollow, discordant resonance, utterly alien to the warm hum of the sanctum or the gentle thrum of the gateway's standby state. He lowered the sword, his heart beginning to pound in a rhythm that had nothing to do with exertion. He walked slowly to the resonator's main console. All readings were nominal. The gateway was closed, the harmonic lock with Konoha stable. But the feeling persisted. A faint, icy itch at the very edge of his perception, not in his mind, but in the air itself. It was coming from the resonator, or more precisely, from the dimensional space it was tuned to monitor. He called Reed. He called Strange. An hour later, the sub-basement was again a council of war. Reed's sensors were now dialed to sensitivities that could detect a dimensional sneeze. Strange's hands were weaving intricate patterns in the air, his eye of Agamotto glowing softly. "There's no breach," Strange said, his voice tense. "No convergence. The fabric is intact." "But there is a fluctuation," Reed said, his face stretched in concentration as he manipulated a hologram of multidimensional topography. "It's not in our dimension, or the Naruto-verse. It's in the interstitial space between. The same space the cleaners came from. A residual echo." "An echo of what?" Peter asked, the cold itch settling in his spine. "Of the surgeon's destruction," a new voice said. Sasuke Uchiha stepped through a newly opened, temporary portal from Konoha, his Rinnegan already active and fixed on the resonator. He had been summoned the moment the anomaly was detected. When you destroyed the surgeon with the harmonic bomb, and when Naruto shattered the primary one with the resonator's song, it was not a clean deletion. Such entities are concepts given form. You can break the form, but the idea of them, the purpose, can leave a scar in the void. He approached the console, his Rinnegan seeing layers of reality they could only measure. The echo is not sentient. It is a pattern of malintent. A ghost of sterilization. And it is resonating with something. With what? Strange demanded. Sasuke was silent for a long moment, his gaze turning inward. The gateway itself. Our two worlds, now linked in harmony, create a unique, stable frequency in the cosmos. To this, echo, that new frequency might register not as a cure, but as a stronger infection. A permanent, organized bridge between two contaminated worlds. It is drawn to it. Like a scab picking at a healed wound. A chilling understanding dawned on Peter. It's not attacking. It's assessing. It's gathering. Yes, Sasuke said. And if it consolidates, if this echo of a purge command gathers enough stray energy from the void, it may attempt to finish the surgeon's work. It will not send cleaners. It will try to sever the bridge. Permanently. And the most efficient way to sever a bridge is to destroy both anchor points. The room went cold. They had won the war, but a landmine, forgotten on the battlefield, had just ticked. "Can we dissipate it?" Reed asked. "A targeted harmonic pulse into the interstitial space?" "Any energy we send into that space risks feeding it," Sasuke countered. "It is made of the negation of energy. It consumes." "Then what?" Peter asked, his voice tight. "We just wait for it to get strong enough to come knocking?" "We find its source of nourishment and cut it off," Sasuke said. "The echo is not powerful. It is a whisper. But it is drawing energy from lingering traces of the convergence, microfractures, residual dimensional static left behind at the sites of the tears. We must find those traces in both our worlds and cleanse them, before the echo can consume them and become something we cannot stop. A joint mission. A cleanup detail on a cosmic scale. Fury, on the secure feed, was already mobilizing assets. "Give us the coordinates of every energy signature that matches this residual static, on our side. We'll have teams there in 12 hours. Shikamaru's voice came through a communication seal from Konoha. "We're mapping our side now. The Nakano River site is clean, purged by the final pulse. But the mountain's graveyard, there may be fragments. And there could be others, older wounds we never knew about." It was decided. 2 strike teams. 1 for each world, to simultaneously cleanse the residual energy. Synchronized to the second, to prevent the echo from fleeing from one site to the other. Peter looked at Sasuke. "I'm going with you. To the mountain's graveyard." He needed to see it. To face the ghost of the horror that had taken his sense. Sasuke nodded. The Hokage will lead the Konoha team. I will take you. Strange frowned. Parker, without your precognition, you'll be vulnerable in a hostile, alien energy environment. I have this, Peter said, hefting the Jien. And I have a promise to keep. He met Strange's gaze. I'm the bridge. If there's a termite in the wood, I need to help fix it. The Mountain's Graveyard, Narutoverse, 0400 hours, local time. The air here was still dead. The crater where the secondary tier had been was now a smooth, bowl-shaped plane of black glass, reflecting the starless sky like a dark mirror. The silence was absolute, deeper than any natural quiet. It was the silence of a place that had been scoured. Naruto's team, a hand-picked squad of sensory and barrier specialists, was already at work on the crater's rim, setting up a complex purification array. Their chakra glowed in the gloom, a brave, warm light against the consuming dark. Sasuke and Peter stood at the edge of the glass. Peter's borrowed Konoha gear felt right this time. The Jien was strapped to his back. The cold itch was now a physical pull here, a wrongness that made his teeth ache. There, Sasuke said, his rinnegan piercing the veil. He pointed to several spots on the glassy floor. To Peter, they looked identical. To the divine eye, they were faint, weeping sores on reality. Residual static. They are drawn to the memory of the tear. How do we clean it? Peter asked, his hand on the sword's hilt. We don't. We contain and disperse. A gentle, precise frequency, the opposite of the resonator's blast. A lullaby, not a war cry. He handed Peter a small, complex seal tag. Place this on the center of the largest nexus. It will emit a canceling wave. I will handle the others. Peter took the tag. It was warm, buzzing with a gentle, soothing energy. He looked down the sheer, glassy slope into the heart of the crater. Okay. No spider sense. No webs. Just, don't slip, Parker. He began the careful descent, his boots scraping on the smooth, unnerving surface. The silence was so deep he could hear the blood rushing in his ears. Each step felt blasphemous. He reached the center, a point Sasuke had marked with a tiny flare of chakra. As he knelt to place the seal, the echo found him. It wasn't an attack. It was an awareness. The cold itch in the air coalesced into a pressure, a focal point of silent hunger above him. He looked up. Hovering over the crater, formed from wisps of darkness and the reflected starlight on the glass, was a shapeless, shifting smudge. It had no form, only intent. The ghost of the surgeon's purpose. It pulsed, and the residual static spots on the floor glowed a sickly violet in response, feeding it. Peter's hand, holding the seal, froze. The ghost echo focused on him. On the living, breathing source of the infection, it remembered. It began to descend, a slow, inevitable tide of unbeing. Move. Place the tag. But his limbs felt heavy, locked in the memory of the freezing cold that had once crawled through his veins. From the rim, he heard Naruto's shout. Peter. A golden Rasengan shot past him, impacting the descending echo. It passed through it like smoke, causing only a momentary ripple. Ninjutsu was useless. It was made of the negation of their energy. The echo reached for him. And Peter's body, trained for weeks in Tenten's forms, moved without his conscious command. It wasn't the spider sense. It was muscle memory. He dropped into a forward roll, the echo's cold touch whispering through the space where his head had been. He came up, the Jien already sliding from its sheath with a soft shing. He didn't think. He fell into the first kata Tenten had drilled into him, a simple, defensive sweep. The blade, forged in one world and imbued with the silent harmony of his lost power, passed through the edge of the echo. And it resonated. The Jien didn't cut. It sang. A single, pure, high note that vibrated from the steel. The echo recoiled, its form shivering, distorting. The note was a tiny fragment of the same harmonic truth that had destroyed its progenitor. A truth the blade, tuned by Peter's own hands and his unique energy signature, could now channel. It wasn't enough to destroy it. But it was enough to hurt it. To surprise it. Peter saw his opening. Still in motion, he lunged forward and slapped the purification seal onto the glowing nexus on the floor. The seal activated. A soft, golden pulse radiated out, washing over the glass. The violet static spots winked out, one by one. The echo above him let out a silent scream of frustration as its nourishment vanished. It wavered, growing fainter, more diffuse. At the same moment, across the dimensional gap, he knew Fury's teams and Naruto's others would be doing the same. Starving the ghost from both sides. The echo, bereft of power and faced with the painful resonance of Peter's blade, shuddered into nothingness. Not with a bang, but with a whisper of dispersing frost. The crushing pressure lifted. The air, while still dead, no longer felt hungry. Peter stood panting in the center of the black glass, the jian held steady in his hand, its song fading to a memory in the metal. He hadn't needed a warning tingle. He had needed a teacher, a sword, and the courage to take the next step. Sasuke appeared beside him in a flicker, having placed his own seals. He looked from the vanished echo to Peter's blade, a flicker of approval in his eyes. The bridge holds. Naruto landed next to them, his gaze sweeping the now clean crater. Good work. Both of you. He clapped Peter on the back, the impact solid and real. See? You didn't need the tingle. You just needed to remember who you are. Back in the sanctum, the monitors showed the interstitial echo dissipating completely, its source of sustenance cut off from both ends. The ghost was gone. Peter returned the jian to its sheath. The quiet inside him was no longer just an absence. It was a space he had defended. A space he was learning to fill with skill, with knowledge, with the echoes of a song he now carried in his hands and in his heart. The bridge was secure. And the bridge keeper was finding his strength, one silent, resonant step at a time. Chapter 14, The Bridge Keeper's Oath. Sanctum Sanctorum, 3 weeks after the echo. The sub-basement was undergoing another transformation. The atmosphere of a high-tech bunker was softening, giving way to something resembling a collaborative study. A low, polished wooden table from Konoha now sat beside Reed Richards' holographic projector. On it rested a delicate ceramic tea set, a gift from Sakura, next to a Stark pad running simulations. The smell of sencha green tea now sometimes mingled with the ozone and old books. Peter sat at that table, not in his suit, but in comfortable clothes, his fingers tracing the lines of a complex Fuinjutsu diagram on a scroll. Tenten's training scroll lay open beside it, a lesson on chakra-assisted metallurgy juxtaposed with a printout on vibranium's unique crystalline structure. His jian, now regularly cleaned and oiled, rested in a simple stand within arm's reach. He was studying for 2 worlds at once. The official exchanges were a resounding success. Konoha's first solar-powered water purifier was providing clean water to a remote outpost. In return, a SHALD-vetted package on germ theory and antibiotics had, according to a thrilled Shikamaru, revolutionized their field medicine's approach to sepsis. The bridge was humming with productive, peaceful traffic. But Peter's role was evolving. He was no longer just the technician or the diplomat. He was becoming the interpreter, the context. He explained to Reed why a particular seal logic couldn't be brute-forced by computing power, but required an intuitive understanding of natural energy flow. He explained to Shikamaru, in patient, simple terms, how a transistor worked, using sketches of water mills and gates. It was during one of these sessions, with Naruto on a secure video feed from the Hokage's office, the man having embraced the tablet technology with the enthusiasm of a child with a new toy, that the first real test of the bridge's principles arrived. Naruto's face, usually so open, was lined with a somber tension. We have a situation. It's not a dimensional threat. It's internal. A border dispute with the land of Earth has escalated. A rogue IWA faction has taken hostages in a neutral trade outpost. They're using a weapon we've never seen. It emits a field that disrupts chakra on a cellular level. It's not lethal, but it renders our shinobi incapacitated with neural pain within minutes. We can't get close. On the shield feed, Fury's eye narrowed. You want tech support. For a local conflict. This is exactly the kind of scenario the protocols were meant to prevent. We are not interdimensional mercenaries. I'm not asking for soldiers, Naruto said, his voice firm. I'm asking for a scientist. For Peter. To look at the weapon. To understand its frequency. Our enemy is using a tool that attacks the fundamental energy of our world. Peter understands that energy, and he understands technology that can manipulate frequencies better than anyone in our world. He looked directly at Peter through the screen. This is what the bridge is for. Not for armies, but for aid. For knowledge to stop a slaughter. Peter felt every eye in the room on him. Strange were calculating, Reed's fascinated, Fury's deeply skeptical. It's a conflict zone, Hill stated. Non-combatant or not, it's a massive risk. I'll have a full ANBU guard on him at all times, Naruto promised. He will be in the rear, in a secured field lab. Sasuke will be his personal shadow. He will be safer than in one of your New York alleyways. Peter's mind was already racing. A chakra disruptor. It sounded like a brutal, crude version of the surgeon's null field, but on a biological level. His own experience with the infection, with the seal of shattered song, with the resonator's harmonics, it all gave him a unique insight. He could help. Not with a web-swinging rescue, but with a multimeter and an oscilloscope. He stood up. I'll go. Parker, Fury began. Director, with all respect, Peter interrupted, a new steel in his voice that had been forged in the mountain's graveyard. This is my call. The protocols say the gatekeeper can authorize aid missions for non-military, humanitarian, or critical knowledge-based purposes. This fits. People are going to die if this weapon isn't countered. I have knowledge that can stop it. That's the whole point. He looked at Strange. Can you portal me directly to their secured location? No gateway needed, just a one-time jump. Strange studied him, then gave a slow nod. I can. But the moment I sense a threat to our reality, I'm pulling you back. Understood. Fury was silent for a long moment. Then he growled. Fine. But Richards, you're on standby here for analysis. Hill, package a suite of non-lethal counter-frequency tech for Parker to take as a baseline. Parker, you're a consultant. Not a combatant. Your only weapon is your brain. Don't make me regret this. Konoha Forward Base, border of the Land of Fire, 18 hours later. The air here smelled of pine, cold mud, and tension. Peter stood inside a large, sealed tent that served as a field lab, set up a mile from the besieged outpost. He wore a dark, nondescript Konoha field uniform over a lightweight SHALD-issue sensor vest. Around his neck, Naruto's communication stone hung on a cord, warm against his skin. Before him, on a table, was the captured weapon. It was an ugly, industrial-looking device, a bulky central power core with protruding emitter rods. It was inert now, but just being near it made the ANBU guards at the tent entrance shift uneasily. Sasuke stood in the corner, a silent, watchful presence. Naruto was at the front lines, coordinating the containment. Peter's hands moved with methodical precision, connecting shield sensor probes to the device, syncing them with a Konoha-made chakra detection array Shikamaru had provided. The data began to stream onto two side-by-side screens, one showing a standard electromagnetic spectrum analysis, the other a real-time chakra flow visualization. It's not just a jammer, Peter murmured, his eyes darting between the screens. It's an imitator. It's emitting a wave that mimics the inverse harmonic of living chakra, causing destructive interference within the body's own energy network. It's like shouting the exact opposite note of someone's heartbeat. He thought of the shattered song Seal, which had used the same principle to shatter the infection. This was a perversion of that beautiful, terrible truth. He worked through the night, fueled by coffee that tasted of roasted barley and a fierce focus. He cross-referenced the weapon's emission profile with the frequency map of the surgeon's null field, looking for similarities, for weaknesses. He found one: instability. The crude device had a rhythmic power surge every 4.3 seconds as it recycled. It has a heartbeat, Peter announced to Sasuke and the waiting Naruto over the comms. A flaw. We can overload it. Not by hitting it with more energy, but by feeding it a mirrored, chaotic version of its own disruptive wave during its surge period. It'll fry its own circuits. Can you build a counter-emitter? Naruto's voice crackled back. I have the specs. But I need your seal masters. The counterwave needs to be projected, focused. A technology seal hybrid. I designed the wave, they inscribed the delivery system. It was a fusion of their worlds, born of necessity. Within an hour, two Konoha Fuinjutsu experts were in the tent, their eyes wide at the strange technology but nodding as Peter explained the waveform using chakra flow analogies. They worked together, Peter sketching the frequency pattern, the masters translating it into a scalable barrier seal array that could be deployed on large shields. As dawn broke, gray and cold, the first prototypes were ready, large, round shields made of reinforced wood and metal, their surfaces painted with the new, hybrid counter-frequency seal. Peter stood with Naruto and Sasuke on a ridge overlooking the outpost. Below, they could see the rogue IWA shinobi behind barricades, the ugly weapon humming at their center. It will work? Naruto asked, his gaze on the hostages building. In theory, Peter said. The math is solid. The fusion is elegant. Naruto grinned. That's good enough for me. Believe it. He raised a hand. A squad of Konoha shinobi, armed with the new shields, moved forward in a phalanx. The moment they entered the weapon's range, the IWA forces activated it. A visible wave of distorted air pulsed outwards. The frontline Konoha shinobi braced, raising the shields. The counter-seals activated. They didn't glow. They sounded, a low, resonant thrum that clashed with the weapon's whine. The disruptive wave hit the shields and shattered, like a wave breaking on a specially tuned seawall. The shinobi behind them advanced, unharmed. The IWA forces stared in shock. Their ultimate weapon was useless. The battle, what was left of it, was short and decisive. Without their technological edge, the rogue faction was swiftly overwhelmed by Konoha's superior tactics and numbers. The hostages were freed, unharmed. Peter watched from the ridge, his heart pounding not with fear, but with a profound, quiet vindication. He hadn't thrown a punch. He hadn't woven a web. He had used a chalkboard, a soldering iron, and a deep, hard-won understanding of how two worlds could talk to each other. He had turned a weapon of pain into a shield of safety. Naruto clapped him on the back as they walked back to camp. See? You didn't need to be Spider-Man. You just needed to be Peter Parker. Bridge Keeper. Back at the sanctum, the reports were filed. Fury was tersely approving. Reed was ecstatic about the field data. Strange seemed, quietly impressed. That night, alone in his apartment, Peter opened Tenten's training scroll to the next lesson. He picked up the Jien, its weight familiar and comforting. He began the slow, deliberate forms, not as a frantic defense against a ghost, but as a meditation. He was not the hero he had been. He was something new. A scientist who spoke the language of seals. A diplomat who carried a sword. A man from New York who could calm a storm in another world with a carefully drawn frequency. He was the bridge keeper. And he had just proven that the strongest thing you could build between worlds wasn't a weapon, or even a gateway. It was an idea. And his idea was that no one, in any universe, should have to suffer a weapon they couldn't understand. He would be the translator. The fixer. The quiet note of reason in the chaotic symphony of the multiverse. He finished the kata, sheathed the sword, and looked out his window at the glittering, chaotic, beautiful sprawl of New York. Somewhere across the impossible void, a village in the leaves was sleeping safely, in part, because of him. The oath was unspoken, but it settled in his bones as firmly as any promise made to a dying uncle. With great understanding, comes great responsibility. And for the first time, Peter Parker felt equal to both. Chapter 15, The Last Lesson. Peter and MJ's apartment, Queens, 6 months after convergence. Spring in New York was a riot of contradictory smells, the sweet, rotten promise of blooming flowers fighting a losing battle against wet garbage and bus exhaust. Peter Parker sat on his fire escape, a place that had once been a perch for a web slinger, now a bench for a thinker. In his hands was not a web shooter, but a smooth river stone from Konoha, warming in the afternoon sun. The chaos of the city below was a familiar symphony, but he listened to a different part of it now, the underlying rhythms, the structural stresses, the hum of millions of lives creating a frequency all its own. Inside, the apartment was a map of his new life. MJ's latest art series, ethereal sketches of Konoha's forests blended with the stark lines of New York steel, covered one wall. On his desk, a sleek vibranium-cased laptop, a joint gift from Reed and Shikamaru, displayed a real-time diagnostic of the gateway resonator, its status a steady, calming green. Leaning in the corner, the Jien in its scabbard stood beside a framed, slightly blurry photo of him, Naruto, and a scowling but leaning-in Sasuke, taken after the border incident. He was at peace. Not the passive peace of inaction, but the active, humming peace of a bridge properly bearing weight. The lesson had been learned not in a single battle, but across months of quiet work. He had helped Konoha design an early warning seismic network using repurposed shield sensor tech. He had mediated a, surprisingly heated, debate between Reed Richards and Shikamaru on the ethical implications of genetic memory versus clone technique. He had even, to his own astonishment, begun to grasp the intuitive, flowing logic of basic fuinjutsu, finding it not so different from the elegant simplicity of a well-designed circuit board. He was a citizen of two worlds, and he carried the passport of understanding. The quiet in his mind was no longer a void to be feared. It was his workspace, his listening room. He could sit in the middle of a roaring subway car and pick out the single note of a child's laugh, the specific strain in a support beam, the hidden rhythm in a stranger's anxious tapping. He had traded a radar for a seismograph, and he was learning to read the deeper tremors. Tonight was a milestone. The first formal cultural exchange, a delegation from Konoha was coming through the gateway for a strictly limited, heavily escorted tour of a SHILD-approved cultural showcase, which essentially meant a trip to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a Broadway matinee, Hamilton, Fury's surprisingly savvy choice, and dinner at a very discreet, very secure midtown sushi restaurant. Peter's job was to be the guide, the translator of context. To explain why people in paintings looked so solemn, why actors rapped about history, and why the tuna was so expensive. He was looking forward to it. The vibration started in the stone in his hand. Not the communication stone, that was quiet and warm around his neck. This was the river stone, a simple, mundane thing he'd picked up from the Nakano River after the final cleanup. It was vibrating in sync with a deep, sub-audible hum that was suddenly in the air. It wasn't the gateway. The diagnostic was green. It wasn't a threat. His old spider sense would have been screaming. This was a notification. He stood up, the stone humming against his palm like a living thing. He looked out across the rooftops. The air over Manhattan shimmered, not with heat, but with a gentle, prismatic distortion, like the world was seen through a faint soap bubble. It was beautiful, silent, and immense, covering half the sky. A convergence. But not like last time. This was not a tearing, sickly wound. It was an aligning. A gentle, cosmic sigh as two realities that had brushed against each other for months finally settled into a new, stable proximity. The bridge they had built hadn't caused it, it had perhaps made it inevitable, a channel for the natural harmonization to flow through. His vibranium laptop chimed. A message from Reed, time-stamped nanoseconds ago. Peter, read this now. Sensors across the globe are detecting a uniform dimensional sheen. No energy spikes. No hostile signatures. It appears to be a passive, universal phase shift. The Narutoverse is saying hello. Permanently. A second later, his communication stone flared with warm light. He touched it, and Naruto's voice, clear as if he were on the fire escape, filled his mind. Peter. You feel that? The whole village just sighed. The sky here looks like a painting. It's not scary. It feels right. Shikamaru is having a fit trying to calculate the implications, but the old toads at Mount Mayaboku say it's a blessing. The worlds are holding hands. Peter looked at the shimmering sky, at the humming stone in his hand, at the green light of the gateway console inside. He understood. The desperate, surgical bridge they had built had become a capillary. And now, the two worlds, no longer sick and bleeding, were forming a deeper, healthier connection on their own. They were becoming neighbors in the multiverse. He laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated wonder. The last lesson wasn't about fighting, or fixing, or even understanding. It was about acceptance. About realizing that some changes aren't disasters to be survived, but evolutions to be welcomed. The door to the apartment slid open. MJ stepped out, her eyes wide, reflecting the shimmering sky. Peter, what is that? Is it bad? He took her hand, placing the humming river stone in her palm. She felt the vibration, saw the connection in his eyes. No, he said, his voice full of a certainty that resonated deeper than any spider sense ever had. It's not bad. It's just a new kind of normal. He pointed to the gateway readout inside, then up at the shimmering sky. We built a door. And now, it looks like the walls are turning into windows. That night, the cultural exchange went ahead under the glittering, prismatic sky. The Konoha delegation, a group of wide-eyed scholars and 2 stoic ANBU guards, marveled at the museum, were baffled and delighted by the Broadway rap, and pronounced the sushi acceptable, but the rice seasoning lacked subtlety. Peter guided them, explaining, translating jokes, feeling not like a guard or a gatekeeper, but like a friend showing off his hometown to new family. The shimmer overhead was a constant, gentle reminder that they were all under a new, shared sky. Later, back at the sanctum, the analysis was conclusive. The phase shift was permanent, stable, and benign. The two dimensions now existed in a state of soft adjacency. The gateway was now less a lifeline and more a conveniently large front door. Travel would be easier, safer. Communication would be instantaneous. The risk of hostile incursions was now vanishingly small, the two realities were harmonized, making the infection paradigm impossible. Strange, for once, looked almost relaxed. The rules have changed. The game is different. We're not patching a leak, we're co-authoring a new chapter of reality. Fury, on the feed, simply grunted. Makes my job harder and easier at the same time. Parker, you're now officially the head of interdimensional relations. Don't expect a pay raise. Peter just smiled. The last lesson was this: you don't always have to fight the universe. Sometimes, if you're very careful, very brave, and very kind, you can just make friends with it. And find that you were always meant to be a part of its song. He was Peter Parker. Photographer. Scientist. Student of the sword. Friend of the Hokage. Bridge between worlds. And as he looked at the shimmering sky, a permanent, beautiful scar on the old reality, he knew he was exactly where he belonged, not on the edge of either world, but in the warm, humming, perfectly balanced space he had helped create right in the middle. Chapter 16, The Symphony. 1 year after the alignment. The rooftop of the newly constructed Harmonics Institute in downtown Manhattan offered a view unlike any other on Earth, or in any world. To the east, the familiar, jagged skyline of New York, a monument to chaotic human ambition. To the west, shimmering in the permanent, gentle phase shift that had become as ordinary as the sunset, the impossible, fractal silhouette of Konoha's Hokage Mountain and its great trees could be seen, not as a reflection, but as a truth existing in the same space, layered like a beautiful ghost. The air smelled of street food, ozone, and, faintly, of cherry blossoms from the imported trees thriving in the Institute's atrium. The Institute itself was the heart of the new normal. A fusion of Stark-level engineering, Wakandan design aesthetics, and Konoha's organic architecture, it hummed with a peaceful, productive energy. Here, shinobi in soft body armor studied quantum mechanics alongside shield agents learning chakra control meditation. Medic Nin and surgeons from Metro General collaborated in labs where glowing seals stabilized advanced surgical rigs. Peter Parker stood at the rooftop's edge, not in a suit of any kind, but in the simple, comfortable uniform of the Institute, a dark gray jacket with a subtle, dual emblem on the lapel, a spider contained within a stylized leaf. He was no longer just the gatekeeper. He was the director of cross-dimensional applications. The title was bureaucratic, but the work was pure Peter, solving problems no one else could see coming, with tools no one else could fully understand. The quiet in his mind was now his greatest asset. It allowed him to hear the dissonance before it became a scream. Today was the anniversary. Not of the first tier, but of the alignment, the day the world sighed and settled into harmony. A day of celebration across 2 planets. The rooftop door hissed open. Naruto Uzumaki stepped out, not in Hokage robes, but in a sharp, modern suit that looked faintly ridiculous and utterly charming on him. A year of easy travel and deep diplomacy had smoothed some of his rougher edges, but the boundless, fox-like energy was undimmed. "They're ready for you down there," Naruto said, joining him at the rail. He gazed at the blended skyline, a look of perpetual wonder on his face. "Never gets old. Looks like a painting my dad would have messed up." Peter smiled. "How's the speech?" "Shikamaru wrote it. It's got 3 jokes, 2 heartfelt declarations of friendship, and 1 veiled threat about protecting the peace. Standard diplomatic stuff." He nudged Peter. "Your turn after me. The guy who made it all possible. No pressure." Peter felt none. The frantic, weight of the world pressure had dissolved over the year, replaced by a deep, steady certainty. He had faced cosmic surgeons and won. A speech was nothing. They were joined by others. Sasuke, his presence less a shadow and more a quiet pillar, stood slightly apart, his gaze analytical as he observed the flow of energy between the 2 visible cityscapes. Tenten, now head of the Institute's Applied Materials Division, was discussing tensile strengths with a Wakandan engineer, her jian now joined by a bead of vibranium on its hilt. MJ was there, her arm linked with Peter's, her latest exhibition, Dual Exposure, Portraits of a Shared Sky, opening downstairs. Reed Richards and Shikamaru Nara emerged from the door, locked in a heated but friendly debate about the philosophical implications of shadow clones on the concept of individual identity. Shikamaru, in Konoha attire but with a sleek tablet in hand, looked more animated than Peter had ever seen him. Troublesome, he was saying, but he was smiling. Down in the Institute's grand atrium, a crowd was gathering, a living tapestry of the new world. Shinobi, scientists, diplomats, artists, and curious citizens from both sides mingled under a ceiling that was both glass and a projected image of Konoha's eternal summer sky. Peter's thoughts drifted back over the year. The moments that defined this peace weren't the grand ceremonies, but the small, human exchanges. The time a young Konoha genin, terrified of the noisy New York subway, had been calmed by an old jazz musician playing a saxophone in the station, the music a universal language. The collaboration between Sakura and Helen Cho that had eradicated a previously incurable neurodegenerative disease in both worlds. The hilarious, ongoing rivalry between the kitchens of Ichiraku Ramen and a famed Brooklyn noodle shop, each trying to create the ultimate fusion bowl. He thought of his own growth. The Jien was no longer a symbol of loss, but an extension of his will. He would never be a master like Sasuke or Tenten, but he could now move through the forms with a grace that spoke of hard-earned discipline, not desperate flailing. He had even begun to inscribe simple, functional seals, a personal containment field for volatile chemicals, a warmth-generating array for MJ's drafty studio. They were crude, but they worked. He was learning the language. The loss of his spider sense was a closed chapter. In its place was something broader, an empathy for systems, for the delicate balance of things. He could walk into the Institute's power core and feel, in the hum of the reactors and the flow of chakra-infused coolant, if something was 0.1% out of phase. He was tuning the world, not just saving it. Naruto stepped up to the podium in the atrium, his image and voice projected across both New York and Konoha. He spoke of peace, of curiosity over fear, of the will of fire meeting the spirit of New York. He was electrifying, raw and real, and the crowd loved him. Then he said, but this bridge wasn't built by Hokages or sorcerers or scientists alone. It was built by a guy who believes that with great power comes great responsibility, and that the greatest responsibility is to help your neighbor. Even if your neighbor lives in a tree on the other side of reality. My friend. Peter Parker. Peter took a deep breath. The quiet within him was perfect, a still pool ready for his words. He walked to the podium, the eyes of two worlds upon him. He saw familiar faces, May, weeping happy tears beside a bemused but proud Doctor Strange. Fury, in the back, giving a single, grudging nod. The Konoha Council, looking on with reserved approval. He didn't need notes. A year ago, he began, his voice clear and carrying, I was lost. I'd lost a part of myself I thought defined me. I was in a world that wasn't mine, facing a terror I couldn't punch. All I had was, a responsibility to help. He paused, looking at Naruto, at Sasuke, at Tenten, at MJ. And I learned that when you act on that responsibility, you don't walk alone. You find family in the strangest places. He gestured to the shimmering window wall that showed the ghostly image of Konoha. We didn't just stop an invasion. We didn't just build a bridge. We proved something. We proved that different doesn't have to mean dangerous. That the unknown can become your home away from home. That a song from one world can heal a sickness in another. He picked up a simple tuning fork from the podium, a symbol of the Institute. He struck it. A pure, clear A440 note filled the silent atrium. This is a single frequency. Simple. Alone, it's just a sound. He then nodded to a group of Konoha shinobi and musicians from Juilliard standing by. They raised instruments, shakuhachi flutes, cellos, biwa lutes, violins. But when other notes join it, with respect for its tone, you get harmony. You get music. You get a symphony. He struck the fork again. The musicians began to play, not a piece from one world or the other, but a new composition, one that had been written collaboratively over the year. It was strange, beautiful, weaving together pentatonic scales with complex jazz chords, the drone of a show with the drive of a bass line. The music swelled, filling the institute, spilling out into both cities. In Konoha, people stopped in the streets to listen to the eerie, wonderful sound drifting from their own sky. In New York, people looked up at the shimmering vision of another world and heard its music join their own. Peter stepped back from the podium, his work done. He wasn't a soloist. He was the conductor who had helped them find the key. As the symphony played, he felt a hand slip into his. MJ, her eyes shining. On his other side, Naruto clapped a heavy hand on his shoulder, grinning like a maniac. Tenten gave him a sharp, approving nod. Sasuke's gaze held his for a second, and in it was a respect that needed no words. Peter Parker looked out at the crowd, at the faces of two worlds woven together. He thought of the scared kid from Queens, the arrogant hero, the lost man, the bridge keeper. He was none of those things alone. He was all of them. And he was exactly where he belonged, not as the center of the story, but as a vital, grateful note in a magnificent, unfolding, and forever shared symphony.